Chapter 969. Contract Elves. In a pink room in the mole class dormitory of the Alessia Elven Academy, Alice looked at Aster, who was expressionless beside Noah, in shock. She could not believe that this cute girl was an elf. However, this was not strange. The highest elves in human form were very, very rare. Many elven envoys spent their entire lives trying to form a contract with the highest elves in human form, but they could not find one. In the end, they could only wait until their powers as elven envoys declined to nothing as they grew older, and they had no choice but to accept this regret. Of course, it did not mean that elves who did not exist in human form could not be the highest elves. For example, Grey and Vaz's magical elves were also the highest elves, but they did not exist in human form. However, elves who were not in human form were not necessarily the highest elves, but elves in human form were definitely the highest elves. Now, in front of Alice, there was such an existence in human form. She was definitely the highest elf in existence. How could Alice not be shocked? "You don't believe me?" Noah rolled his eyes. "Then do you want to see Aster's elven magic device form?" That's not necessary." Alice frowned and glared at Noah. "But, even if it's a contracted elf, there's no reason to be naked and hug her master, right?" Hearing this, before Noah could say anything, Aster lifted his head and suddenly said, "Don't worry. I'm not naked, I'm wearing these socks." Alice was speechless. And Noah also remembered. Indeed. Although in the morning, Aster, who got into his bed, was basically in a state of naked, he still wore knee socks. "But, why are you only wearing knee socks?" Noah could not help but complain. "Isn't that worse than not wearing anything?" She didn't wear any clothes, but only wore knee-high socks. Coupled with Aster's pitiful and peerless beauty, it really made one's heart beat faster than not wearing anything. However, after hearing Noah's words, Aster's expressionless face suddenly showed a hint of hesitation and an imperceptible blush. "Moss. Master actually wants to see me without knee socks." No. Even Master can't." Seeing Aster's shy look, Noah was surprised and at the same time, speechless emotions began to fill his heart. She did not feel shy when she was naked, but she felt shy when she did not wear knee socks. What logic of shame was this? As for Alice, after hearing Aster's words, her eyes widened slightly and turned her head stiffly to look at Noah. "You actually let your contracted elf take off her knee socks for you to see? You shameless person." After saying that, Alice immediately wanted to draw her sword, but Noah knocked her on the head with a karate chop in the midst of a bang sound. Instantly, Alice hugged her head and squatted down with tears in her eyes. "Can you not be delusional all the time? Can you at least understand the situation before drawing your sword?" The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. "I really don't know what you witches' brains are made of. There should be a limit to wrongly accusing someone, right? I didn't wrongly accuse anyone." Alice raised her eyes and looked at Noah with some resentment. "Undoubtedly, I saw it with my own eyes, is that so?" Noah narrowed his eyes and said unhappily. "Then did you hear my order for Aster to take off her knee socks?" Alice suddenly choked. "You can't say anything, right?" Noah rubbed his temples and said as if he couldn't take it anymore. "Don't do it again, if there's a next time." After thinking for a while, Noah said this directly. "If there's a next time, I'll punish you in a very perverted way." After hearing this, Alice's pretty face instantly turned as red as boiling water. She was at a loss for what to do. How can this be? I'm not mentally prepared." Mentally prepared? What mental preparation? "I'm not going to use a very perverted way to punish you now. What mental preparation do you need?" Just as Noah was speechless at Alice's bewildered look, Aster tugged at Noah's sleeve and looked straight at Noah like an innocent child. If I do something wrong, will Master use a very perverted way to punish me? Noah laughed dryly. He didn't know what to say. At the same time, at the entrance of the Elven Academy, a young girl wearing a witch costume slowly walked out of the elven forest. She arrived in front of the gate and raised her head to look at the vast gate. Is this the Elven Academy, the #1 Elven Envoy training institution in the Empire? The Elven Envoy Academy is named after the Saintess of Salvation. Celestia smiled as if she was helpless. Who would have thought that as the Demon King and the Demon King's elf, we would visit this place one day? I heard that the witch, Gravath, is the dean of this academy. Lotus frowned for the first time, showing an extremely obvious reluctance. I really don't want to see that witch again. Back then, after we escaped from the academy, it was the Twilight Witch who took us in. Lestia revealed something that no one else in the world would ever know. If it wasn't for that witch, you wouldn't have participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and won't have the title of the strongest sword dancer and be worshipped by all the Elven envoys. I've never thought of getting that kind of title. Lotus shook her head. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have participated in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Hearing Lotus' words, Celestia's pretty face couldn't help but soften as she held Lotus' hand. So, this time, it's my turn to help you fulfill your wish. Lotus turned her head and exchanged glances with Celestia. Then, she turned her gaze back to the gate and closed her eyes. At the same time, a pitch-black luster bloomed all over Lustia's body. A series of pitch-black feathers reverberated around her body and wrapped around her body. Lestia gradually turned into a ray of light and gathered in Lotus's hand. In the next moment, a knight's sword that looked like a demon's horn appeared in Lotus's hand. It was also pitch-black in color and was surging with ominous pitch-black fog. Vorpal's sword, penetrating truth. It was the highest-grade elven magic device that Celestia, the dark elf who once belonged to Demon King Solomon, transformed into. With this sword, Leanna Subble became the strongest sword dancer. Now, this sword that once belonged to the Demon King was finally held tightly in the hands of the Demon King's successor. Just for one person. Boom! In the dormitory of the mole class, Noah, Aster, and Alice, who were still in the room, suddenly heard a loud rumbling sound. Their faces were filled with shock. The commander of the Wind King Knights, who had been reduced to acting cute in front of Noah, quivered and abruptly stood up with a gloomy expression. Don't tell me something happened again. Alice didn't even say goodbye and directly rushed out of the door. Seeing this, Noah frowned. Don't tell me it's that dark elf again. Naturally, no one would answer Noah's question. However, Aster looked outside and said expressionlessly, Master, there's something bad outside. Is that so? Noah's eyes flickered slightly and immediately walked out of the door. Aster, let's go take a look. Yes. Aster responded obediently and followed Noah out of the room. After coming out of the mole class dormitory, Noah immediately saw it. In the direction of the Elven Academy's gate, waves of divine aura energy fluctuations rose, mixed with various kinds of flames, which was unusually conspicuous in the dark night. In particular, there was an extremely powerful divine aura energy that soared into the sky like a star, shaking up waves of air, which made Noah's brows furrow even tighter. It feels like there's a lot of trouble. After saying this, Noah directly took Aster's hand and walked quickly in the direction of the gate that was extremely far away due to the overly vast area of the Elven Academy. Chapter 970. With the help of magic wind elf Smough, Alice rushed over from the air and landed in front of the gates of the Elven Academy. However, what appeared in front of Alice was an unbelievable scene. Alice wasn't the only one who found it hard to believe. Even the students who had rushed over because of the loud noise and gathered in front of the gates of the Elven Academy looked at the scene outside with incredulous expressions. In front of the gates of the Elven Academy, the elven envoys of the Wind King Knights who were supposed to be patrolling the gates were half-bent and panting heavily. However, their eyes were also filled with disbelief. In the middle of the encirclement of the Wind King Knights, there was a young girl who was holding a strange pitch-black knight's sword in her hand. She was wearing a foreign costume that resembled that of a witch. Her jet-black hair that reached her waist swayed in the air. She looked extremely elegant as she looked at everyone present and lightly opened her red lips. "I only want to see Noah Doria. You are not my match. You should obediently withdraw from here." The young girl's crisp voice awakened all the elven envoys who were still in shock. Everyone present reacted. How? How could this be? Alice couldn't help but take a step back and stare at the young girl holding the pitch-black knight's sword. After confirming that she wasn't seeing things, she murmured. Lotus Asubble, it had only been a short 3 years since the girl who was known as the strongest sword dancer in the world had obtained supreme glory. In the library of the Elven Academy, there was even a portrait of the young girl. Even though Lotus' appearance had matured due to the 3 years that had passed, it couldn't be said that she had changed. Among the Elven envoys here, almost everyone had seen the performance of the strongest sword dancer at the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Almost everyone was captivated by Lotus' beautiful sword dance. Thus, who would forget her figure and appearance that left a deep impression on them? In particular, the Vorpal sword in Lotus's hand was known by everyone as the elven magic equipment that belonged to the strongest sword dancer. Thus, everyone here knew who Lotus was. However, it was precisely because everyone knew Lotus that they found it hard to believe. Why? Inside the gates of the Alessia Elven Academy, Claire was also present among the crowd of students, her face filled with disbelief. Aside from Claire, Lindsley, who had brought Carol along, was also present. She stared blankly at Lotus, unable to believe what she was seeing. Why is Lena Schubel here? However, the most unbelievable thing was that the strongest sword dancer didn't seem to be here for a friendly visit. I'll say it again, Lotus said expressionlessly. Have Noah Doria come out. Noah Doria. Alice's expression changed. She bit her lip and took a deep breath. She calmed down and walked forward with a serious expression. Excuse me, why are you looking for a student from our academy? Lotus lifted her head and looked at Alice. She then shook her head gently. It has nothing to do with you. You should leave. I don't want to hurt innocent people. Lotus's words made many people secretly heave a sigh of relief. Even Claire and Lindley, who were in the crowd, felt their hearts relax. So Lena Schubel wasn't an enemy. Alice was the only one who resisted the urge to relax as she spoke to Lotus. If you want to see a student from the academy, you can go through the proper procedures and apply to enter the academy, right? That witch won't let me get what I want if I use that method. Even if she does, she'll have to pay a hefty price. Lotus raised her eyebrows and pointed the pitch-black knight's sword at Alice. Moreover, I didn't come here just to chat. Have that man come out. Everyone could hear the determination in Lotus's tone. She wouldn't give up until she achieved her goal. This made all the elven messengers puzzled. Why was the strongest sword dancer willing to cause such a huge commotion just to see the male elf? That man. Claire said with a bit of irritation. Did he do something bad to Lena Schubel as well? It can't be. Lindsley also couldn't believe it. Did the strongest sword dancer cause such a huge commotion just to see a man? Just as everyone was feeling incredulous, a voice floated into everyone's ears. You're looking for me. Following this voice, Noah walked through the crowd while holding Aster's hand and walked out of the Elven Academy. When Noah and Aster appeared, Lotus's eyes flashed slightly. Even the surface of the Vorpal sword in her hand flowed with a black light. The difference was that Lotus was acting like this because of Noah's appearance, while Lestia, who had transformed into an elven device, was acting like this because of Aster's appearance. Aster, who was holding Noah's hand, slightly tightened his grip. He stared at the vorpal sword in Lotus's hand and said softly, "Master, that elf user's elf magic device was once owned by the Demon King." Noah was startled and also looked at the vorpal sword in Lotus's hand. It was pitch black in color. A strange aura surged around it like an ominous black gas. That sword was exactly the same as the one Noah saw in Aster's dream when he was in the Demon King's hand during the final battle with the Saintess. "Master, please be careful." Aster more or less became serious. "That elven envoy isn't an ordinary elven envoy." Even without Aster's reminder, Noah knew. From Lotus's body, Noah could sense a tremendous divine power and powerful aura. That aura was many times stronger than that of Greyvath, who was known as the strongest elven user in the continent. Noah even felt that Lotus's aura was enough to rival Saber, who was the highest level heroic spirit. "Do you feel it?" Lotus suddenly spoke. "This is because of you that I have awakened this power." "Because of me?" Noah was once again startled. But in the next moment, Noah's eyes suddenly focused. In front of Noah, Lotus gently pressed her empty hand on her heart. Because of Lotus's action, Noah, who was looking at Lotus's heart, saw it almost instantly. He saw the inside of the heart of the girl named Lotus Asubble. It was an incomplete feather that emitted a weak, gentle white light. "You?" Noah looked at Lotus in surprise. Inside your body, when Claire mentioned Lotus Asubble, Noah had received a hint from the world about the location of the world fragment that was lost in this world. At that time, Noah had already guessed that the world fragment was very likely related to Lotus Asubble. But he didn't expect that the extent of the relationship was to this extent. The world fragment that was lodged in her heart. The girl in front of him was actually the same as Orpheus. Seeing Noah's performance, Lotus's eyes flickered violently and she stared at Noah. "You can really see." As soon as her voice fell, Lotus suddenly clenched the elven device in her hand, causing the pitch-black knight's sword to tremble slightly. In an instant, it was enveloped by a dense divine aura. "Aster!" Noah's eyes focused again, and without hesitation, he imbued the divine aura into Aster's body. Immediately, Aster, who was tightly holding Noah's hand, turned into a burst of light particles and gathered in Noah's hand. In an instant, it condensed into a shining silver steel sword and fell into Noah's hand. In front of him, Lotus, who was tightly holding the pitch-black knight's sword, bounced forward without any warning. She heavily stepped on the ground and turned into a black shadow. The elven device in her hand rapidly condensed a large amount of divine aura, almost fusing with her body. Like a pitch-black bolt of lightning, she cut through the air with a sharp sound and violently shot towards Noah's direction. Chapter 971. Chi. Lotus, who had transformed into a bolt of black lightning, was already faintly discernible. In a flash, she arrived in front of Noah. Immediately, the tip of the pitch-black magic sword in her hand mercilessly shot out like lightning, ruthlessly stabbing towards Noah's chest. Seeing Lotus' lightning-like stab, Noah's expression couldn't help but change. Noah couldn't be more familiar with such lightning-like speed and stab. That was clearly the first move of the Absolute Sword skill that Greyvath had taught Noah. Absolute Sword skill. Initial form Purple Lightning. As if intending to confirm Noah's thoughts, Lotus, who had suddenly appeared in front of Noah like a bolt of lightning, lightly opened her red lips and chanted the name of the Absolute Sword skill. The pitch-black magic sword in her hand mercilessly stabbed towards Noah's chest. Ding! At the critical moment, the silver holy sword that seemed to be the counterpart of the pitch-black demon's sword suddenly appeared. Accompanied by a clear sound, sparks flew in the air, blocking the demon's sword that the most powerful sword dancer mercilessly pierced through the air. Ah! Seeing Lotus attack Noah, all the elven envoys of the Alicia Elven Academy cried out in alarm. including Claire, Lindsley, and Alice. You. Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, looked at Lotus in bewilderment through the sputtering sparks and the pitch-black magic sword. How did you learn this move? Don't you know? Lotus raised her eyes, met Noah's gaze, and spoke softly. My absolute sword dance was taught by Grey Vath, who has the title of a Twilight Witch. After saying this, Lotus didn't give Noah any time to react. The pitch-black magic sword in her hand carried a powerful divine power energy that was like a whistling gale, shaking the air. Along with the vibration of the divine power energy, the pitch-black magic sword in Lotus' hand instantly transformed into beautiful crescent arcs, bringing with it waves of whistling wind. It was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were fiercely attacking Noah, covering the sky and covering the earth as they enveloped Noah. His field of vision was completely covered by the continuous slashes formed by the terrifying sword light. Not only was Noah not surprised, but he also began to calm down. With a leap, Noah took a step back. The demon slayer in his hand seemed to have turned into a gust of wind, surging forward like a violent storm. It welcomed the slash that was like an army of thousands of men and horses that covered the sky and covered the earth. Clang, 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 clang. Instantly, the two elf envoys wielding the silver holy sword and the pitch-black demon's sword were separated from each other by a short distance. Unexpectedly, they both slashed out a torrential storm of slashes. Under the situation where the spectators could barely see streaks of sword light flashing, the continuous collisions were like violent thunderbolts. Waves after waves of overlapping sword and halberd sounds reverberated in the air. In less than 3 seconds, Noah and Lotus had each swung out hundreds of slashes, causing the white and black-colored sword light to fill up the short distance between them. And every time the holy sword and magic sword collided, it would shake up ripples of energy visible to the naked eye and dazzling intense sparks that spread out, causing the air to become chaotic, and the ground to shake up small pieces of gravel. Clang! It wasn't until 2 or 3 seconds later that the holy sword and magic sword, which had completely transformed into sword light that covered the sky and earth, appeared and heavily collided with each other, stirring up an extremely loud sound of swords clashing, and then one after another, they were shaken away. Bang! Almost at the same time, Noah and Lotus, who were shaken away at the same time, landed heavily on the ground, causing a muffled sound. No one could discover it. The moment Noah's and Lotus' feet landed on the ground, a vortex of divine power suddenly gathered under their feet, and then it exploded. With a sharp sound, Noah and Lotus both turned into a bolt of lightning at the same time, rushing toward the opponent in front of them. The silver holy sword and the pitch-black magic sword in their hands carried an astonishing cold light, cutting through the space, erasing the distance between them in an instant. Ding! In the next second, the silver holy sword and the pitch-black magic sword collided with each other with great precision, stirring up a burst of dancing sparks. They collided with each other in the way of sword tip against sword tip. Such a precise thrust was no longer a realm that ordinary humans could achieve. And Lotus, who had made this thrust, was finally surprised. It was because, like Lotus, Noah used a sword skill that should only be used by the continent's strongest elf user and sword dancer. Ultimate sword skill, initial form, purple lightning. However, the surprise only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, Noah and Lotus suddenly let go of the elven device in their hands at the same time. With a small leap, they took a step back and clenched one of their hands into a fist. As if they had agreed, Noah and Lotus clenched their fists at the same time. A burst of divine might gathered into a whirlpool shape. With a whistling sound, the whirlpool heavily smashed into the hilts of the holy sword and the demon's sword that were still hovering in midair, maintaining the precision of their sword tips as they collided with each other. Ultimate sword skill. Form 6 Shattered Tooth. The ultimate sword skill created by Grey and Vath was very diverse in content, and there were special sword moves that could deal with various situations. For example, body part destruction, group annihilation, countering specific attributes, weapon destruction, counterattacking skills, and sword killing, etc. The initial form of the purple lightning was created for the purpose of destroying parts of the body. Gathering all of the divine power under the feet, and then exploding, it would stimulate a violent speed that no one could react to, and unleash an extreme thrust, instantly piercing through the opponent's body and directly taking away the opponent's mobility. This move was somewhat similar to Noah's leap. Therefore, Noah only used a short half an hour to master the initial form of this ultimate sword skill. And Form 6's Foot Shattered Tooth was a sword move for weapon destruction. By converting the divine might energy into impact force in one breath, and then directly instilling it into the elven device with the help of physical punches, the elven device would instantly stimulate its body due to the instilled divine might that was as substantial as a physical impact force. From there, it would explode, causing its destructive power to soar several times. This move was also similar to Noah's Annihilation Strike. Therefore, after the initial form of Purple Lightning, Noah only used less than half an hour to master the sixth form of a Shattered Tooth. In theory, this sixth form of the ultimate sword skill could even directly shatter the opponent's elven device. Therefore, this move was classified as a weapon destruction move. However, under the situation where Noah and Lotus used this ultimate sword skill at the same time, neither of them achieved their goal. Clang! Under the stimulation of the divine power that was instilled in a violent manner, the demon slayer, that was once owned by the Saintess of Salvation, and the Vorpal sword, that was owned by the demon king of Scourge, shook with a strong light, and rushed towards each other. Bang! In the end, the two elven magic devices of the highest grade were shaken with a loud and clear explosion. With the tip of the sword as the center, the two elven magic devices were shaken into a circle of sharp energy. Under the rebounding force of the collision, the two elven magic devices were both shaken into the air and spun like a windmill before falling into the distance. However, before that, Noah and Lotus had already very tacitly retreated, dodged, and pulled a long distance away, and landed on the ground not far away. Paw! The two elven devices that were spinning like windmills fell from the sky, and landed exactly where Noah and Lotus were. With a crisp sound, Noah and Lotus reached out their hands and tightly grasped the two elven devices, and returned to the two elven users' hands. The whole place was suddenly silent. From Lotus's sudden attack to the two engaging in a brilliant sword dance, the whole process, not even 10 seconds had passed. By the time the surrounding elf envoys reacted, the brilliant sword dance had already ended and disappeared like a flash in the pan. At this moment, there was only one emotion that filled everyone's heart. Shock. Shock that came from the bottom of their hearts. It was as if Noah and Lotus were looking into a mirror. Their movements were exactly the same. There was not a single difference. Chapter 972. Of course, Noah's and Lotus' sword dances were exactly the same, without the slightest difference. After all, the sword skills that the two of them were using were the ultimate sword skills that Greyvath had taught them. However, because Grey Vaz had retired from the public stage for quite some time, the ultimate sword skill she created had yet to be displayed in front of others. Lotus, on the other hand, had won the Elven Sword Dance Festival with her ultimate sword skills 3 years ago. In other words, the legendary sword dance that the strongest sword dancer had used to capture the hearts of almost all the elves was the ultimate sword skill. Now, the ultimate sword skill had become synonymous with Lotus. The world didn't know that the ultimate sword skill was created by Grey Vaz. They only knew that the ultimate sword skill was known for its beauty, and it was the sword dance of the strongest sword dancer. That was all. Now, Noah was using the exact same sword dance as the strongest sword dancer. The elves present couldn't help but feel shocked and incredulous. Isn't that guy the dean's student? In the crowd, Claire's fiery red eyes were filled with bewilderment. Why does he know the exact same sword dance as the strongest sword dancer? Not only is he able to use the same sword dance as the strongest sword dancer, but she also didn't hesitate to make such a big commotion just to meet him. Lin Silei, who was also in the crowd, had a thoughtful look in her beautiful eyes. Could it be that the two of them really have some sort of relationship? Although Alice was also extremely surprised, she did not forget her duty and hurriedly took a step forward. Stop fighting. Unfortunately, neither Noah nor Lotus had the spare energy to pay attention to Alice. You know the ultimate sword skill too? Lotus frowned. Don't tell me that the witch taught you that as well. Compared to my matters, I care more about your matters. Noah looked at Lotus and said in a deep voice. If you can explain, I would be very grateful. Noah more or less had a clue as to why the legendary strongest sword dancer came here to find him. Noah and Lotus were not as inextricably linked as other people thought. Without a doubt, this was the first time Noah and Lotus had met. However, it was obvious that Lotus was here for Noah. Just like Bio and Orpheus, who were also possessed by the world fragment back then. Back then, Bio and Orpheus, who were possessed by the world fragment, came to Noah because of the influence of the world fragment. Now, Lotus, the strongest sword dancer, should be the same, right? However, from Lotus's eyes, Noah could see a different feeling from Bio and Orpheus. Bio and Orpheus were both subconsciously influenced by the world fragment. They instinctively wanted to come to Noah and look for Noah. Lotus, on the other hand, seemed to be different from the unconscious influence. The strong will in the young girl's eyes told Noah about it. She only wanted to come in front of Noah because of her own will. What was the reason for this? Lotus did not say a word. She just raised the elven device in her hand and pointed it at Noah. Like a violent storm, divine energy continuously poured out of her body. In the end, even Lotus's whole body was wrapped in it. It was like a slowly flowing water wave, like a group of phosphorescent water vortexes, very beautiful. Feeling the powerful and unusual divine energy, not to mention the surrounding students, even Noah frowned a little. Wasn't this strongest sword dancer's divine might a little too powerful? Even Gray and Vath, who were known as the strongest elven user in the continent, were not as strong as Lotus, right? In addition, although Noah has not been able to use Aster skillfully, his physical strength was comparable to Hercules in the form of a servant because of the LV, for ability value bonus. Lotus was able to face such a Noah without falling into a disadvantageous position, which was even more amazing. Is the gap between the strongest sword dancer and the strongest elven user so big? Noah did not think so. The only thing that bothered Noah was what Ren had said at the beginning. Lotus said that this power was awakened because of Noah and was controlled by him. Could it be that Lotus was actually the same as Bio, and because of the world fragment in her body, she had some kind of evolution in her power? Or could it be that the world fragment residing in Lotus's body had some other effect on the strongest sword dancer? He did not understand. Without any information to refer to, even if Noah was smart, there was no way to get an accurate answer. It seems that you didn't really come to find me to chat. Noah clenched the demon slayer in his hand. His frowning eyebrows slowly relaxed as he looked at Lotus. If you don't hesitate to make such a big noise just to have a sword dance duel with me, then I will accompany you for a while. After saying that, a phosphorescent wave of air began to rise from Noah's body. As if his body temperature had reached the limit, waves of divine power were emitted. Lotus's eyes burst out with a bright light, as if she was satisfied with Noah's power. She raised the vorpal sword and gathered all the power in her body. Whether it was the demon slayer or the vorpal sword, they were both elven devices formed by the highest elves in human form. Moreover, their previous owners were the Saintess and the Demon King. Now, the former Saintess and Demon King's elves had respectively signed a contract with Noah and Lotus. This made the upcoming sword dance seem like a fated duel, causing the air to be filled with tension like smoke on a battlefield. Noah and Lotus poured a vast amount of divine power into their elven devices. Whing! Suddenly, the demon slayer and Vorpal's sword bloomed with a bright white and black light, displaying their power to the extreme. All the elves in the surroundings subconsciously held their breaths, not daring to move. Even Alice, as the commander of the Wind King Knights, who should have stopped this duel, stood there stiffly, not knowing what to do. There was no other way. The divine power of Noah and Lotus was too astonishing. With Alice's strength, if she rushed into the place where the two vast divine powers collided, she would definitely be sent flying in an instant. At a certain moment, Noah's and Lotus's expressions suddenly froze, their bodies tensing up. Just as Noah and Lotus were about to charge at each other, a cold voice suddenly sounded from the field. Stop! The tense atmosphere between Noah and Lotus suddenly froze in midair. Everyone present looked at the source of the voice. There, Gray and Vath slowly walked out, their eyes sweeping over Noah and Lotus. The moment they saw Lotus, Gray and Vath's eyes flashed, the corner of their mouth raised into a faintly discernible cold arc. I didn't expect that you would come here personally, I thought that you wouldn't dare to see me again. Hearing this, Lotus's expression showed obvious displeasure for the first time. Cunning witch. After saying that, Lotus removed the elven device in her hand, the divine power around her retracted back into her body, turned around, and began to leave in the direction of the elven forest. Seeing this, Noah subconsciously called out. Wait! Lotus stopped, turned around, and looked at Noah. The Elven Sword Dance Festival in 2 months, I will be waiting for you there. Leaving these words behind, Lotus left without looking back. Noah just stared at Lotus's back, he wanted to chase after her, but helplessly gave up. Even if he chased after her, what could he do? Could it be that he could still get the world fragment back? But Noah didn't know how to get the world fragment out of a person's body. Unless he directly took out the world fragment in his body like what Bio and Orpheus did. Noah really wanted to get the world fragment back. However, to let Noah kill a stranger in order to get the world fragment back, Noah couldn't do that. Then how to get the world fragment back? Noah didn't know. Therefore, Noah could only watch Lotus leave and mumble. The Elven Sword Dance Festival. Chapter 973. Today, the Elven Academy was destined to not be peaceful. Although it was already night time, the news of the strongest sword dancer, who had won the championship of the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago and received supreme glory, had become the object of admiration in the hearts of almost all the Elven messengers. Especially the short duel between Noah and Lotus. The Elven messengers who were present to watch the entire process were talking about it with great relish, causing all the students to lose sleep that night. On the contrary, the commotion caused by Lotus in order to see Noah was consciously or subconsciously ignored by everyone. At least, apart from Noah, Lotus didn't make a move against anyone in the Elven Academy. She didn't even make a move against the Elven messengers of the Wind King Knights who were patrolling. She was only passively defending. Otherwise, with Lotus' strength, if she really wanted to make a move against the Elven messengers of the Wind King Knights, those Elven messengers definitely wouldn't be unscathed. In addition, the unparalleled strength that Lotus displayed made the Elven messengers who secretly admired the strongest sword dancer to a whole new level in their hearts. In the end, this matter was left unsettled. However, in the end, no one knew why Lotus went through so much trouble to cause such a huge commotion in the Elven Academy. No. Lotus's purpose had been made clear from the very beginning. This girl who was hailed as the strongest sword dancer didn't hesitate to cause such a huge commotion just to see Noah. Thus, the students who gradually calmed down from the excitement of seeing the object of their dreams began to realize a few questions. Why did Noah have the same sword dance technique as Lotus? Why did the strongest sword dancer not hesitate to cause such a huge commotion just to see Noah? Why did Lotus leave when the dean appeared? the only male elven messenger on the continent. The strongest elven messenger on the continent. The strongest sword dancer on the continent. What kind of relationship did these three special existences have with each other? Due to these questions, all sorts of speculations flew about. This even led to the information regarding the extremely short sword dance between Noah and Lotus falling into the hands of the other forces in the following days, becoming known to those who were well informed. Although he didn't know what kind of relationship there was between Noah and Lotus, the two of them definitely had some sort of relationship. This was something that everyone was certain of. While the people outside were making all kinds of guesses and causing a commotion, Noah followed Gray and Vaz to the dean's office. What's going on? As soon as he entered the office, Noah immediately asked. What's your relationship with that Lena Subble? Lotus, like Noah, knew the absolute sword skill created by Gray and Vath. Moreover, Lotus had personally said that her absolute sword skill was taught to her by Gray and Vase. Then, the strongest sword dancer and the strongest elven messenger definitely had some sort of relationship, and it wasn't an ordinary one. However, this was something that no one knew about. This was a little too strange. I do have some sort of relationship with that child, but it's not as deep as you think, Gray and Vase said nonchalantly. My relationship with Lotus can't even be considered as master and disciple. It's only because I had something to ask of that child 3 years ago that I taught her the absolute sword skill. You taught her the absolute sword skill because you had something to ask of her. Noah was startled, then smiled bitterly. Isn't that the same as me? That's right. My relationship with Lotus is similar to my relationship with you. We're together because we have something to ask of each other. Gray and Vase looked at Noah. Just like you, I taught that child the absolute sword skill 3 years ago so that she could participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. After saying that, Gray and Vase told Noah about their past that no one knew about. This matter had a wide range of implications. If they were to mention it, they had to mention a family name first. Elstian. A family name of a noble that had served the royal family since the founding of the Audisia Empire. This noble was still a favorite of the royal family until 4 years ago. Not only was his influence huge, he was second to none in the Audisia Empire, but there were also many talents in the family. It was said that among the 5 elven concubines who served the 5 elven kings, quite a few of them had come from the Elstian family. It could be said that the Elstian family was the most prestigious of the prestigious families. However, that was 4 years ago. 4 years ago, there was an incident that no one in the continent didn't know about. Rubia Elstian. Born in the Elstian family, she was a very outstanding witch concubine. Some people called this witch concubine a rare genius that only appeared once every few hundred years. This was because when she was only 9 years old, she was entrusted with a large-scale ceremony. When she was 15, she stood out and became the Fire Elven concubine that served the Fire Elven king. Just like how the Elven envoys idolized the most powerful sword dancer, Rubia was also an idol to the witch concubines who idolized the Elven concubines. However, all of this only lasted until 4 years ago. 4 years ago, this elven concubine that served the Fire Elven king and was idolized by almost all the witch concubines suddenly stole the most powerful flame elf from the Fire Elven king's temple and disappeared without a trace. Knowing that the elven concubine had betrayed him, the Fire Elven king was furious. With the Elstian family's territory as the center, he set fire to the entire Audisia Empire, causing the Audisia Empire to suffer a great disaster. Since then, not only had the Audisia Empire been unable to receive the favor of the Fire Elven concubine, they had also tried to extinguish the fire that spread throughout the empire. However, it was futile and they suffered greatly. Because of this, while the Audisia citizens prayed for the Fire Elven king's forgiveness, they also gave the Elven concubine, who had betrayed the Fire Elven king, a hateful title, Calamity Elven concubine. After that, the Elstian family was stripped of its title and territory, and Rubia's biological parents were sent to prison. That was the downfall of the most prestigious family, and it was disbanded overnight. In order to appease the Fire Elven King's anger and extinguish the disaster that spread throughout the Audesia Empire, I had no choice but to think of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Grey Vath sighed. As long as the representative of the Audesia Empire can win the Elven Sword Dance Festival, the Elven King's anger will be appeased and he will once again bestow protection upon the Empire, causing the disaster to disappear. I see. Noah nodded in understanding. So, you had your eyes on that sword dancer at that time. I met her by chance. Grey Vath seemed to have sunk into her memories. She came from a bad place. Just like you, she didn't have a proper identity on this continent and had no relatives. Just like you, I gave her what she wanted and taught her the ultimate sword technique. I allowed her to ascend the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival and win the Elven Sword Dance Festival to appease the Elven King's anger. Grey Vath shook her head. After that, she disappeared. She only reappeared in front of me after 3 whole years. Today is the day. After hearing Grey Vath's words, Noah fell silent for a moment before looking at Grey Vath. Then, why did you teach me the ultimate sword technique and let me participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival this time? You will know the reason sooner or later. Grey Vath closed her eyes as if she didn't want Noah to see anything from her eyes. You will understand after you ascend the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah didn't continue asking and fell into deep thought. Outside the dean's office, Ashtar, who was leaning against the wall, heard the sound of the door opening and immediately turned his head. Then, he saw Noah walking out of the office. Apologies, Ashtar. Noah walked up to Ashtar and reached out his hand to pat his head. Sorry to keep you waiting. It's nothing. Ashtar shook his head. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly shut his mouth. At the same time, Noah narrowed his eyes and turned his head to the side. There, a pitch-black figure quietly appeared. Chapter 974. In the shadows, a young girl wearing a dark dress appeared out of thin air. The pair of pitch-black wings on her back slowly turned into scattered pitch-black feathers and disappeared into the air. She lifted her head and looked straight at Noah. The highest-ranking dark elf who came uninvited smiled sweetly. She lifted the hem of her skirt and bowed politely. Good evening, both of you. Did you have fun playing with Lotus? Ashtar didn't say anything. He just stared at Losty with an expressionless face. Logically speaking, as the contracted elf of the Saintess and the Demon King, Ashtar and Losty should be enemies. Especially Losty. The master of this dark elf, Demon King Solomon, was killed by the Saintess and the Holy Sword. She should hate Ashtar. However, at this moment, Ashtar was looking at Lustia as if she was someone he had met by chance. Losty, on the other hand, seemed to care more about Noah than Ashtar. She glanced at Ashtar and shifted her gaze to Noah. On the other hand, Noah looked at Lustia and spoke as if he had expected her to. The contracted elf of the sword dancer is indeed you. That's right, I am Lotus Contracted Elf, the sword of the former Demon King Solomon. Losty smiled. Although a Demon King like Solomon isn't a true master to me. Not really my master. Noah raised an eyebrow. What does that mean? It means on the surface. Losty shook her head and said. He was just a failed product that was devoured by the Demon King's power and went berserk. Compared to Lotus, Solomon is far inferior. Hearing Lastia's words, before Noah could react, Ashtar, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. You want to say that the Demon King that my former master killed was just an unpresentable guy? Saying such a sentence, Ashtar's usually cold tone carried a trace of passion. It was obvious that Lastia's words made Ashtar a little angry. Regarding this, Lastia spoke frankly without commenting. This is the truth. Miss Sacred Sword, the existence known as the Demon King is not someone like Solomon. In fact, it would be better to say that only Lotus is qualified to be the true Demon King. What are you talking about? Noah grabbed Aster's hand and stopped him from speaking. He then looked at Losty. You mean that Lotus's Subble is the Demon King? That depends on how you view the Demon King, Lestia shrugged and said with a mischievous smile. If the Demon King in your eyes is the male elf that will bring disaster to the continent, then Lotus is indeed not the Demon King. Lastia's words made Noah even more confused. What was this dark elf trying to say? Looking at Noah's confused expression, Losty suddenly said. Do you know how many elves of the dark? This strange question made Noah frown. How many elves of the dark? In this world, who didn't know the answer to this question? Just as Noah was thinking, Aster grabbed Noah's hand. When Noah looked over, he shook his head at Noah. Master, there aren't only 5 elves of the dark. In the distant past, there was another elves of the dark. There was another elves of the dark. Noah was stunned. The elves of the dark elves Lotus a Subble. Losty said to Noah with a gentle and sweet voice. A long, long time ago, the elemental elves had a war that engulfed the entire world. At that time, there were 2 factions. One was led by the 5 elves of the dark elves of the elves. Hearing this, Noah understood what was going to happen next. After all, the world only knew of the 5 great elf kings, but not the dark elf king. If that was the case, then the Dark Elf King's faction must have been defeated in that battle, right? Just as you thought, the Dark Elf King was defeated in the Elven War against the 5 Elven Kings, and even his life force was wiped out. Lestia seemed to have guessed what Noah was thinking, and her eyes flickered slightly. However, the Dark Elf King didn't actually disappear. At the last moment of his life, this Elf King used the magic of reincarnation to transfer his power to a human male. He hoped that one day, the human who inherited his power would be able to destroy the 5 Elf Kings. A human male. Noah's heart skipped a beat as he exclaimed in surprise. Could it be? That's right. The so-called Dark Elf King is actually a human male who inherited the Dark Elf King's power. Lestia said word by word. At the last moment of his life, the Dark Elf King predicted that the human race would start to prosper in the future and gradually be able to control the elves. Therefore, he decided to reincarnate his power into a human. The reason he chose to reincarnate into a human male was to deceive the 5 Elf Kings. This was because only a pure young girl could interact with the elves. This was a universal law. If he reincarnated his power into a human male, then it would be a very good cover-up, and the 5 Elf Kings wouldn't discover that the Dark Elf King was still hiding this move. As for me, I am responsible for guiding the human male who inherited the Dark Elf King's power. Lestia turned in a circle, bent down, and bowed again. In the past thousands of years of history, there have been several human males who inherited the Dark Elf King's power. However, almost all of them ended their lives before meeting me, who was responsible for guiding the inheritors of the Dark Elf King's power. Only Demon King Solomon met me and formed a contract with me. However, in the end, Demon King Solomon was unable to control the awakened Dark Elf King's power and was devoured by that power. He completely turned into a lump of resentment, thus giving birth to the Demon King who is a threat to this continent. Hearing this, Noah and Aster looked at each other and fell into silence. Who would have thought that the existence of Demon King Solomon would actually involve the matter of the 6th Elf King? This was really unexpected. Wait. Noah suddenly woke up. You just said that Lena Subble is the true Demon King. Could it be that you mean, that's right? Lestia smiled. This time, the power of the Dark Elf King was inherited by Lotus. Moreover, Lotus's power was awakened perfectly from the very beginning. She didn't even need my guidance. Now, she can control that power as she pleases. Haven't you seen it with your own eyes? Indeed. Lien's power compared to the elves of this world was too strong. Originally, Noah thought that it was due to the influence of the world fragment. But now, it seemed that this wasn't the case. Of course, the Dark Elf King's power is definitely not at this level. Although Lien can freely control this power, she hasn't completely drawn out all of it. Lestia looked at Noah with a smile that didn't look like a smile. In other words, Lien, who fought with you just now, didn't use her full power. That was natural. Lien came to the Elven Academy just to see Noah. And when she attacked Noah, it was just to test Noah. There was no need for her to use her full power. But, if it wasn't for the Dark Elf King's power, Lien wouldn't have been able to fight Noah without being at a disadvantage. This was the secret of the strongest sword dancer. Faced with this fact, although Noah didn't doubt it, he realized that there was a problem that couldn't be ignored. There's a fundamental contradiction in your words, Noah said calmly. Undoubtedly, you said that the Dark Elf King's power can only be transferred to human males. Undoubtedly, Liena Subble is a girl, right? Lestia didn't answer this question. Instead, she stared at Noah as if she wanted to completely see through Noah. There was a strange look in her eyes that others couldn't understand. Shouldn't I be asking you this question? Asking me? Noah couldn't help but be stunned. What was the meaning of this? Chapter 975. Looking at Noah's confused face, Lastia's tone became a little gloomy. Don't play dumb. You should know very well what Lotus has on her. After being reminded by Lastie, Noah immediately understood. World Fragment. If there was something on Lotus that could even affect the Elf King, then it would be the World Fragment. Lotus said that she has something that belongs to you, Lestia said as she looked at Noah. Although I don't know what it is, and even Lotus herself doesn't know what it is because of that thing that the Dark Elf King chose to reincarnate in Lotus. At the end of the day, the Dark Elf King's goal was to eliminate the 5 Elf Kings one day. That was why he used a great magic spell that ordinary people couldn't see through before his death. He reincarnated his power into the human race that was destined to prosper in the future. The reason why the Dark Elf King chose to reincarnate his power into a human male was to deceive the public. In other words, the Dark Elf King's power did not have to be reincarnated into a human male. Instead, the Dark Elf King chose to reincarnate his power into a human male due to his own considerations. Naturally, if the situation changed, the Dark Elf King's power did not need to be reincarnated into a human male. I don't know why the Dark Elf King chose to reincarnate into Lotus's body instead of a human male, but Lotus said so. Lestia lowered her head and said word by word. Perhaps she has something that even an existence like the Elf King can only fear. That might be the case. The air suddenly became oppressive. However, Noah understood Lestia's words. The Dark Elf King allowed a human male to inherit his power so that he could destroy the 5 Elf Kings one day. If there was something mysterious in Lien's body that even the 5 great Elven Kings could not compare to, and the Dark Elven King felt that he could rely on it to destroy the 5 great Elven Kings, it was only natural that the Dark Elven King's power would choose to reincarnate into Lien. Because of that thing's existence, not only did the Dark Elf King's power reincarnate into Lotus' body, but it was also naturally awakened from the start. It was even controlled by Lotus as if it was her own arm, Lestia explained to Noah. And Lien said that that thing seemed to belong to you. Noah fell silent when he heard Restia's words. Strictly speaking, the world fragment did not belong to Noah at all. However, only Noah could actively come into contact with an existence like the world fragment. Other than Noah, even Orpheus, who could be said to have unlimited power, could only passively endure the lodging and influence of the world fragment. A fantasy breed like Bio even had its existence changed. Not only did it mutate, but its power even surpassed the category of a fantasy beast. Therefore, Lotus was the same. Since birth, Lotus had been lodging in the world fragment. Because of the existence of the world fragment, the Dark Elf King's power even went against the principle of being reincarnated into a human male. As a result, it chose to be inherited by Lotus. It even naturally awakened and was freely controlled by Lotus. It could be said that Lotus became the strongest sword dancer, formed a contract with the highest-ranking Dark Elf who had the responsibility of guiding the Demon King, inherited the Demon King's power, and even had the kind of life she had now. It was all because of the world fragment. This young girl's fate had been changed by the world fragment since birth. In addition, Lotus, like Orpheus and Bio, could vaguely feel that the world fragment longed to return to Noah's hands. Through Noah's hands, it would return to the space between worlds and restore its original consciousness. This made Lotus mistakenly think that the world fragment belonged to Noah. Therefore, Lotus felt that her fate was changed by Noah. Therefore, Lotus said that the Dark Elf King's power, which was the Demon King's power, was awakened by Noah and was controlled by him. The truth had been revealed. The reason why Lotus cared so much about Noah and why she did not hesitate to cause such a big commotion was also revealed. It was all just to see Noah. As for Lestia, it was only because she learned of Noah's existence from Lotus that she became curious about Noah. To be honest, I have a lot of questions about you. There was a playful smile on Lestia's pretty face, but her eyes were fixed on Noah the entire time. Only pure and innocent girls can interact with elves. The reason why Demon King Solomon is an exception is only because he inherited the power of the Dark Elf King. However, you are not a Demon King and did not inherit the power of the Dark Elf King, so how can you interact with elves? Also, what is the thing that caused the Dark Elf King's power to choose Lotus instead of a human male? What is it? Losty looked at Noah curiously. You're right. If possible, can you please help me answer these questions? Answer. How should he answer? Should he tell Lestia that the thing in Lotus's body was a world fragment? Would Restia believe him then? Even if she believed him, what would it change? The Dark Elf King was the supreme existence that controlled the elements of this world. Perhaps the reason why he chose to reincarnate his power to Lotus was because of the world fragment. However, the world fragment had no way to help the Dark Elf King destroy the 5 Elven Kings. However, because of the world fragment, Lotus could freely control the Dark Elf King's power. That was a fact. Perhaps, in this way, Lotus, who completely controlled the Dark Elf King's power, really had the ability to destroy the 5 Elven Kings. Thinking about it this way, it was not unreasonable for the Dark Elf King to choose to reincarnate his power to Lotus. After all, Demon King Solomon was devoured after the Dark Elf King's power was awakened and turned into a lump of resentment. Such a fellow could not inherit the will of the Dark Elf King and destroy the 5 Elven Kings. Therefore, Lestia, who was responsible for guiding the Demon King, was extremely satisfied with Lotus, who could perfectly control the Dark Elf King's power. It was normal for her to be curious about the thing that allowed Lotus to freely control the Demon King's power. Unfortunately, Noah was not destined to answer Lestia's question. You won't understand even if I tell you. Noah met Lestia's gaze and said indifferently. You, on the other hand, suddenly appeared here and told me so much. Don't tell me you're really just curious. That's true. Lestia pursed her lips and smiled. However, this time, the smile on Lestia's face was not a beautiful one that would make people's hearts beat faster. Instead, it was a smile that made people think of coldness and cruelty. That's what Losty said right away. No matter what Lotus has, or what that thing is, the reason the Dark Elf King's power could perfectly awaken is because of that thing. Lestia smiled sweetly. And you seem to want to take that thing back, right? Hearing this, Noah narrowed his eyes and smiled. What if I say yes? Lestia's eyes flashed with a strange glint. I bear the responsibility of guiding the Demon King. The purpose of my existence is to allow the Demon King to perfectly awaken. If I let you take that thing back from Lotus, the Dark Elf King's power might break away from Lotus' control. It will cause Lotus to end up like Demon King Solomon, devoured by an overly powerful force and turned into a lump of resentment. Lustia looked at Noah. So, I will stop you. After saying this, Lustia turned into a black feather and disappeared into the shadows. Noah remained silent as he watched Lustia disappear into the distance. Master. Aster tightened his grip on Noah's hand. I'm fine. Noah rubbed Aster's head and looked out of the window. He looked at the night scenery outside and muttered softly. Looks like I really need to go to the Elven Sword Dance Festival stage. Chapter 976. After exiting the school dormitory, Noah, who was holding Aster's hand, saw 3 figures. A surprised expression appeared on his face. Why are you all here? In the courtyard in front of the school dormitory, 4 girls each occupied a small area. They seemed to be confronting each other, but also seemed to be conversing as they stood there. Moreover, these 4 girls were people that Noah recognized. One had long, fiery red hair tied into 2 ponytails. One had long, golden hair that reached her waist. One had long, sky blue hair tied into a ponytail with a white satin ribbon, hanging behind her back. The last one was obediently following behind the girl with long, golden hair, wearing a maid's uniform. Surprisingly, it was Claire, Lindsley, Alice, and Carol. Hearing Noah's voice, the group of girls who were confronting each other turned their heads. When they saw Noah holding Aster's hand, they were immediately overjoyed. However, in the next moment, that overjoyed expression completely turned into dissatisfaction. Too slow. Claire was the first to complain. What are you doing? That's right. Lindsley brushed her long, golden hair and also said with dissatisfaction. Making a lady wait for such a long time, as a man, it's a bit disgraceful. Once you're out of my sight, you'll immediately cause a lot of trouble. Alice glared at Noah. For the sake of the school's order, can you at least have some self-awareness? Seeing the displeasure on Claire, Lindsley, and Alice's faces, Noah was confused. Did he offend them again? Only Carol, who was secretly laughing on the side, said. Actually, the ladies are worried about Mr. Noah. This one sentence caused the displeasure on Claire, Lindsley, and Alice's faces to stiffen, and their faces to redden. That's not it. What's there to be worried about? Not at all. I'm just worried that the school's order will be disrupted by him. Seeing the 3 young misses acting like they didn't mean what they said and were flustered, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Alright, don't worry about it. I just have some things to ask Gray and Vaz. It's not like I'm being lectured. It's unnecessary to worry. Hearing Noah's words, Claire, Lindley, and Alice glanced at each other. Needless to say, the topic of Noah and Gray's conversation was related to someone. That. Claire coughed dryly and tried to change the subject. Do you really know that strongest sword dancer? As soon as Claire's words came out, Lindley and Alice both pricked up their ears, showing that they were paying close attention. Come to think of it, this was also the question in everyone's heart, right? What was the relationship between Noah and Lotus? No one would not want to know. After all, whether it was Lotus or Noah, their identities were too sensitive. One of them was the strongest sword dancer on the continent. The other was the only male elf envoy. If these 2 people were related in any way, anyone would show a certain degree of attention, right? Especially Lotus, who was the object of admiration in the hearts of almost all elf envoys. Why would this existence, who had always been in an untouchable position, not hesitate to make such a big commotion just to see Noah? It was indeed very suspicious. Not to mention, Noah and Lotus' sword dance was exactly the same. Anyone would pay attention to this question. Sweeping his gaze over Claire, Linley, and Alice's expressions, Noah laughed bitterly. I have no relationship with Lotus Asubble, we only have some interactions on certain matters. Interactions? Linley crossed her arms in front of her chest. Then how come you have the same sword dance as that strongest sword dancer? Yes. Alice nodded repeatedly. If there's no relationship, how come even the sword dance is exactly the same? The sword dance is just the same, there doesn't have to be a relationship, right? Noah shrugged. My sword dance was learned from Grave Oz. Even if I have the same sword dance as that strongest sword dancer, it should be Grave Oz who has some relationship with that strongest sword dancer. Before coming to this academy, I didn't even know who Lotus Asubble was. That's true. Claire seemed to have remembered. When you saw Lotus Asuble's portrait in the library, you didn't even know who she was. Huh? Linley immediately looked at Noah, dumbfounded. It can't be. You don't even know the most powerful sword dancer. Even Alice frowned. Even if she came from the countryside, it's impossible for such a thing to happen, right? Noah was speechless when he saw the reproachful looks on the three young ladies' faces. Speaking of which, your idol, could it be that strongest sword dancer? Claire, Linley, and Alice nodded without hesitation. Yes. Isn't that a given? Why are you asking when you already know the answer? Seeing this, Noah couldn't help but be curious. That Lotus, did she really have such great charm? Although the absolute sword technique could be said to be the best sword dance, not only was its battle performance superb, its performance in the sword dance ceremony was also unparalleled, but it shouldn't be to the point of producing such great charm, right? Come to think of it, the strongest sword dancer, Lotus Asuble's personal charm must also be the reason, right? Just as Noah was thinking this, Carol put her mouth close to Noah's ear and whispered. Because the ladies all idolized the strongest sword dancer, Mr. Noah's sword dance also moved the three ladies. Ah. Noah didn't know how to react, and could only smile awkwardly. Looking at the three girls, Claire, Linley, and Alice, Noah muttered to himself for a moment before suddenly opening his mouth. Hey, Claire, Linley, and Alice, do you all have your own teams? Teams? Claire, Linley, and Alice were startled at first, but immediately reacted. In the near future, what could be related to the team? Naturally, it was the Elven Sword Dance Ceremony. The Elven Sword Dance Ceremony in 2 months would be in the form of a group battle. Participants could only be a team of 5 people. I don't have a team yet. Claire said in bewilderment. I haven't joined any team either, I don't either. Linley seemed to feel embarrassed and turned her head away. Don't misunderstand, I don't have a team because I don't like the elves in the academy. They don't meet my requirements. Although they hadn't known each other for a long time, Noah already knew. This Linley wasn't bad in other aspects, but she was a little too prideful. As for Alice, she spoke as if she was in the right. As for me, I've already formed a team with my companions from the Wind King Knights. Is that so? Noah scratched his cheek and then looked at Claire and Linley. Then, Claire, Linley, do you want to join my team? Claire and Linley were stunned for a moment before exclaiming in surprise. Join your team. You. Alice's reaction wasn't small at all. You're finally going to make a move. Not to mention Alice, even Claire and Linley's thoughts went astray. However, the next moment, the 3 girls dispelled this thought at the same time. That was because there was an extremely serious expression on Noah's face. I have to settle things with Lane Asubble. For this, I need teammates I can trust. Hearing Noah's powerful voice and seeing Noah's extremely serious expression, Claire and Linley seemed to be intimidated and involuntarily nodded. Since you've said so, will reluctantly agree. Saying this, Claire and Linley didn't look like they were accepting an invitation to join the team, but rather a proposal. Their cheeks were flushed red. Obviously, these two innocent young ladies were captivated by Noah's manliness that they usually didn't have the opportunity to see. Only Alice stood rooted to the ground. After a while, tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Why am I the only one with a team? Chapter 977. The next day, in a pink room in the mole dormitory of the Alicia Elven Academy, the gentle sunlight shone in through the window and landed on Noah's face as he lay on the sofa. It was so bright that Noah gradually woke up from his sleep. Is it morning? It was rare for Noah to be slightly disturbed by his sleepiness when he woke up. His mind was not very clear and was still very fuzzy. It couldn't be helped. Too many things had happened yesterday. Originally, in order to practice his cooperation with Aster, Noah had already spent an entire day practicing the control of the elven device. Coupled with Lotus's surprise attack and the matter of forming a team with Claire and Linley, Noah finally had the chance to sleep very late. It was natural that his mind would be a little more sleepy than usual and would be a little less clear-headed. Of course, although he was not clear-headed, Noah did not go to the extent of going back to sleep. After all, there is a team competition this morning. After confirming the establishment of the team, Noah naturally had to participate in the competition of the Alicia Elven Academy's rankings. Only by winning the competition arranged by the Academy, obtaining the corresponding points and ranking in the top 3 would Noah be qualified to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. And today, Noah had to welcome his first team competition. Because he went back to sleep and caused an important competition to be lost without a fight, Noah naturally would not make such a low-level mistake. At that moment, Noah reached out his hand and patted his cheeks. Just as he was about to lift the blanket and straighten his body, a weight appeared in front of him and made him stop. It was a weight that was extremely insignificant compared to Noah's strength. However, this weight was rather soft and comfortable, giving people the urge to hug it tightly. However, it was this weight that drove away the last trace of sleepiness in Noah's mind. He quivered and woke up on the spot. Then, there was no then. Are you awake? Master. A beautiful girl was riding on Noah's body, looking down at Noah from above. Her pair of pitiful eyes were filled with an intoxicating color. Her long silver-white hair sparkled under the morning sun. Although she was petite, the curves of her delicate body were rather exquisite, brimming with a sense of holiness. The girl looked down at Noah expressionlessly. Her pure white skin was exposed to the air just like that. Her entire body was completely naked. Noah's body quivered. He opened his eyes wide as he looked at the pleasing scenery in front of him, but his mind was in a mess. Aster. It was the one who had once annihilated the Demon King, the one with the highest level of strength, the strongest existence among the steel attribute sword spirits. Aster. Aster looked expressionlessly at the stiffened Noahs, tilting his head, as if he was somewhat puzzled. Master, what's wrong? I should be the one asking this question, right? Noah's face twitched. What are you doing? Master, I was just about to wake you up. Aster said as if it was a matter of course. I heard that human males like to have a pure and cute opposite sex to wake them up. Is that wrong? That's not wrong. Noah's face twitched again. He glanced at Aster's naked body and couldn't help but cover his face. But why aren't you wearing clothes? I heard that this is what human males like to dress up. Aster looked straight at Noah, his eyes filled with mystery slightly fluctuating. But, no matter what, I can't let Master see me barefoot. So, I still wear knee socks. Noah only noticed it after Aster mentioned it. On Aster's snow-white skin that reflected the sunlight, a pair of black knee socks was worn on her thighs. Noah couldn't bear to look straight at it. Isn't this more uncomfortable than not wearing anything? You mean you want me to take off my knee socks? Aster's expressionless face actually blushed a little, and she lowered her head shyly. Moss. Master is really a Noah, who couldn't ridicule her, could only sigh in his heart. Although he didn't know why, this sword spirit girl didn't feel embarrassed about not wearing anything. Instead, she was very shy about exposing her feet. At this time, Noah suddenly thought of something and hurriedly said to Aster. Aster! Quickly put on your clothes. Aster was startled. Before Aster could react, a door opened in the pink room. Noah, you should get up. Alice, who had finished dressing, walked out of her room and said as she walked. You have a match today. Don't tell me, you forgot. Alice's voice became stiffer and softer as she spoke. In the end, her voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Noah could already foresee what would happen next. You shameless bastard. In a room of the mole class in the Alesia Elven Academy, a deafening and furious voice resounded. It didn't calm down for a long time. Noah's days in the Alesia Elven Academy were still as noisy as ever. About 15 minutes later, Noah brought Aster to the outside of the Academy's main square. Too slow. As soon as Noah appeared, two girls who had been waiting here for a long time yelled at Noah at the same time. What's going on? Claire put her hands on her hips and looked angry. Today is our first team match. You actually made so many ladies wait for you. Noah, I think you need to work harder on your gentlemanly demeanor. Linley also put her hands on her hips and put her face in front of Noah. It's rare for me to wake up so early today. Yes. Noah helplessly raised his hands as if surrendering. It's all my fault, okay? Actually, Noah wasn't late at all. It was just that it was a little unreasonable to make the girls wait for him for so long. Noah wouldn't go so far as to harp on such a small matter. After accepting it, he looked forward. There was a team of elven envoys in pure white uniforms there. They were Noah, Claire, and Linley's opponents today. Looking at the girls, they seemed a little nervous. Yes. Our opponents are actually them. We're really unlucky, yeah. Noah, who vaguely heard the girls' words, thought they were afraid of his strength. After all, Noah and the strongest sword dancer had performed a wonderful sword dance in front of everyone. Even if the winner wasn't decided, his performance at that time was enough to let others clearly know Noah's strength. However, in the next second, Noah dispelled this thought. Because those girls were all staring at Noah's side, not Noah himself. And beside Noah, Claire bore the gazes of those girls. Although her expression didn't change, a trace of sadness flashed through her eyes. After taking a closer look, Noah realized that the gazes of those girls were not filled with fear, but disgust. Deep disgust. Seeing this, Noah frowned. What's going on? Linley, on the other hand, seemed to know something. She stared at those girls who were looking at Claire with disgust, a trace of indignation flashing through her eyes. Is everyone here? As if she had calculated the time to appear, a teacher wearing a white coat walked out from the door. That was Freya, who had helped Noah find a suitable elf to contract. Once she came out from the door, Freya looked at Aster, who was holding Noah's hand, and pushed the glasses on her face. This is the sealed elf I helped you find that time. Yes. Noah nodded at Freya. At that time, thank you, teacher. I also didn't expect that the sealed elf would be the highest ranked elf in human form. Freya glanced at Aster. Today, let me see the power of the highest ranked elf. Hearing this, Noah smiled. Don't worry, I'll let you see it. Chapter 978. In the elven forest, Noah, Claire, and Linley were led by Freya as they walked on a stone path illuminated by the sun. Noah's, Claire's, and Linley's opponents were walking at the front. Perhaps they were discussing some battle tactics, but they would occasionally glance back at Noah's group, but only cast a cold gaze at Claire. That attitude made Noah rather suspicious. Why was it only directed at Claire? Could it be that there was something special about Claire? Beside Claire, Lindsay Lay followed her closely. For once, she didn't bicker with Claire. Claire herself was also keeping her mouth shut, and her usual aggressive, wildcat-like attitude was completely gone. She was silent the entire time. Only Aster held Noah's hand, and in order to match Noah's pace, she would sometimes take a big step forward, and sometimes jump a little to jump over some obstacles. She was like a cute little animal, very cute. As for Freya, she walked in the middle as if she wanted to separate the two teams. She turned back and looked at Noah, Claire, and Linley, and said, "If you want to participate in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, you need to gather a team of 5. Why are there only 3 of you? We just haven't gathered enough people yet." Noah shrugged. "Didn't you say that even if you don't have enough people, you can still participate in the tournament arranged by the Academy?" "That's true, but this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival is a team competition for 5 people. The later you gather a team, the later you will develop teamwork, which is very disadvantageous to you," Freya said calmly. "Moreover, although the Academy doesn't require a team of 5 to participate in the tournament, no one will participate in a battle without enough people. After all, if the opponent has more people than you, it's obvious that it's disadvantageous." Freya spoke frankly. "And once you lose, the Academy won't care if you don't have enough people in your team. If you don't get enough points, your ranking will still drop. Do you think it doesn't matter?" Teacher, who do you think you're talking to?" Lincilii said with her usual confident and proud smile. "Even if we don't have enough people, with my ice devils Lincilii, we won't lose." "Ice demon." Noah blinked. He still remembered that when Noah first came to this world and went to the Alessia Elven Academy, he used the invisibility helmet to sneak into the academy and accidentally overheard a conversation like this. Hey, did you hear? Fire Cat and Ice Demon from the Crow class are fighting in class again. Why is it them again? They quarrel like that every day. How dare they call themselves nobles? That's why I can't stand those outstanding problem children in the Crow class. After all, one is an elf envoy from a declining noble family, and the other is the young miss of a noble family from the countryside. It's only natural that they don't have any manners." "That's true. Come to think of it, Claire and Lincilii were students from the Crow class, right? If Lincilii was the ice demon, then, hey, Claire." Noah asked Claire tentatively. "Don't tell me you're called a fire cat. Is it strange?" Claire pursed her lips. "My Scarlet is a fire cat elf with the fire attribute. It's normal for people to call me that, right?" Noah smiled bitterly. It was at this moment that Freya spoke up. "We're here." The group stopped in their tracks and looked forward. In front of the road, there was a vast square. It was a square that looked like an arena. In the center of the plaza, there was a circle made of giant stones. As for the circular array, it was emitting a faint light. Looking at the circle, Noah muttered. "Is that the door to the elemental realm?" The elemental realm. It was a different world from the human world, where the elves lived. That was the place where the students of the academy held their group matches. Because in the elemental realm, the elven envoy could use the contracted elves as pure divine energy. Under such circumstances, the body possessed by the divine energy was equivalent to the elves themselves, and would not suffer any physical damage. It would only cause the same degree of damage to the spirit. In this aspect, it was similar to Blaze in the world of absolute double-edged blades. Therefore, in order to prevent the students from causing any irreparable damage during the matches, the Academy held training, learning, and even duels between the Elven envoy. As long as it would cause physical damage, it would be conducted in the elemental realm. You guys come over too. Under Freya's beckoning, Noah and the rest all came to the circle of giant stones. This circle of giant stones was the teleportation formation that opened the door to the elemental realm. A teleportation formation. Noah muttered helplessly. Let's hope it works on me. Noah had a curse resistance that was as strong as a fowl. It was hard to say if this teleportation formation would work on Noah. It's alright, Master. Aster, who had been holding Noah's hand all this time, spoke up, as if he knew about Noah's concerns from his muttering. The main purpose of this circle of giant stones is to open the door to the elemental realm, and not to teleport you. You are only passing through the door, and it will not repel the teleportation formation. Hearing this, Noah was relieved. If that was the case, then the circle of giant stones function was similar to the technology used to teleport people to another dimension in the Demon Academy world. Is everyone ready? Freya looked at the people around her and nodded. Then let's go. With that, Freya closed her eyes and began to chant in the Elven language. That was the spell to open the door. When Freya's chant ended, the boulder formation shone with an intense light. Noah felt his vision was completely covered by a white flash, and then he felt as if he was floating in water. When his feet touched the ground again, Noah opened his eyes. What appeared in front of Noah was a completely different scene from before. Around him were trees that were severely distorted. In the air, there were light particles that looked like fireflies flying back and forth, shining with a weak light. We will now begin the group competition. Freya made the announcement in front of everyone. The competition will begin in half an hour. Before that, both teams will advance in the opposite direction for 10 minutes. After that, you are free to move around. The competition will only begin after half an hour. Do you understand? The so-called group competition was not just a free-for-all between two teams. The official content of the Elven Sword Dance Festival had not been announced, and no one knew how the group competition would be conducted. Therefore, the Academy would organize all the possible forms of the competition. Now, they were imitating the group competition where they would be randomly teleported to different places and had to fight for a long time. Then, both teams disperse at the same time. Under Freya's command, both teams advanced in the opposite direction and went into the forest at the side. Aster. Yes, Master. Once they entered the forest, Aster, who was holding Noah's hand, closed his eyes under Noah's command. His entire body turned into a burst of bright light particles and gathered in Noah's hand, gradually forming a shining silver holy sword. Claire looked over curiously. This is the holy sword that the Saintess used to annihilate the Demon King. Even though I already know about this, but if I think about it carefully, it's really unbelievable. Linley sighed. The Saintess of Salvation's contracted elf would actually form a contract with a male elf like the Demon King Solomon. It's really strange. Linley's words made Noah's footsteps pause, and his gaze turned to the holy sword in his hand. Why did Aster form a contract with Noah? Until now, Noah still did not know the reason. Chapter 979. 30 minutes later, the group competition organized by the Alicia Elven Academy was announced to begin. But 40 minutes later, the battle was announced to be over. Ugh! In an open space in the elemental forest, the 5 girls who were Noah's, Claire's, and Linley's opponents were all lying on the ground, groaning in pain. And in the middle of these girls lying on the ground, Noah stood there with a silver holy sword shining with silver light in his hand. His back was facing Claire and Linley, and from time to time, a divine power flashed from his body, causing the two girls to tremble in their hearts. Actually, after the 30 minutes of preparation time had passed and the group competition was announced to begin, the remaining 10 minutes were spent searching for their opponents. In other words, after Noah's group spent 10 minutes to find their opponents, it only took a split second for the 5 elven messengers to be defeated by Noah. In the whole process, Noah only made 3 movements. 1. Charge forward. 2. Spin. 3. Swing the sword. The first movement caused Noah to rush into the encirclement of the 5 elven users. The second movement caused the holy sword in Noah's hand to sweep across the surroundings like a windmill. As for the third action, not only did the glaring radiance of the holy silver sword shatter the elven devices in the hands of the 5 elven representatives, but before they could react, they were also slashed by the holy silver sword. Of course, in the elemental world, unless the elves and even the elven devices were highly materialized, it would only cause a mental blow to the opponent. Therefore, when Noah stopped, the 5 elven envoys who did not have the slightest injury were all lying on the ground in a semi-conscious state. The whole process took less than 3 seconds. Not to mention their opponents, even Claire and Linley hadn't completely reacted. That was why the scene before them had occurred. So strong. Claire couldn't help but murmur. He's so strong, is that man a monster? Linley's face was full of disbelief. Although the opponents aren't very strong, they aren't weak at all. As the opponents of Noah, Claire, and Linley, this team of 5 elves from the Alicia Elven Academy could probably be ranked in the top 10 of the Academy, right? After all 5 elven users could use the elven devices. And not just anyone could use the elven devices. In the entire Alicia Elven Academy, the number of elven users who could use the elven devices was probably less than half. Under such circumstances, a team of 5 elven users who could freely use the elven devices could be imagined as their strength in the academy. Unfortunately, to Noah, that was all. Gravath, who was hailed as the strongest elven envoy in the continent, couldn't do anything to Noah. Lena Asubel, who had inherited the Dark Elven King's power, also could do nothing to Noah. Thus, how could a few elven users who had just learned how to use the elven devices waste Noah's time? Hey, Linley! Claire could only say in a daze. Could it be that we've joined a very impressive team? Does that even need to be said? Linley's expression was full of excitement. He can compete with the strongest sword dancer and not be at a disadvantage. If it's him, even if he participates in the Elven Sword Dance Festival, he has a very high chance of winning. Linley didn't say the last sentence. However, Claire could understand what Linley meant. Win. Claire couldn't help but reach out and tightly grab a necklace hidden in her uniform. Excitement also appeared on her young, pretty face. This way, we can definitely win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Whether it was Claire or Linley, they both had a reason to win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Now, Noah's strong performance made these two girls who had a strong sense of mission in their hearts see the hope of winning the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Noah, who didn't know the excitement in Claire and Linley's hearts, only held the Demon Slayer tightly. He looked around at the elven users who were lying on the ground and muttered softly. Victory has been decided, right? A low and calm voice responded to Noah's words. Looks like it. Freya, who was wearing a white coat, walked out from the depths of the forest. She glanced at the students lying on the ground, then raised her head and looked at Noah. Your strength seems to be much stronger than I thought. Really? Claire walked up from behind and glanced at Noah. I feel like I'm the extra one. That's right. Linley also walked up slowly with one hand on her waist, looking like a rich young lady on a trip. Even my chance to perform was taken away. How infuriating. Looking at the two young ladies' insincere expressions, Noah couldn't help but laugh. But Freya said so. Although you have won the competition, I feel that this competition is not something that can be used as an experience for you. Freya's words made Claire and Linley pause for a moment. Only Noah frowned, understanding Freya's meaning. The group competition organized by the Academy was not only for the students to compete for ranking points, but also to prepare for the Elven Sword Dance Festival. The Elven Sword Dance Festival was a group competition. And the most important thing in a group competition was team awareness and teamwork. One of the reasons why the Academy organized the group competition was to let the students develop teamwork awareness and teamwork in group battles, so that they could make sufficient preparations to enter the Elven Sword Dance Festival. A battle like this where Noah completely crushed his opponents alone could not be used to develop teamwork and teamwork. You are indeed very strong. Even if you don't rely on your teammates, there shouldn't be any team in this academy that can do anything to you, right? Freya looked at Noah and said. However, the Elven Sword Dance Festival isn't as simple as the group competition in the academy. The elven users who can go on that stage are all the best in their respective countries. Even if you can continue to crush 1 or 2 groups, or even 2 or 3 groups, or even a dozen groups, do you have the ability to crush all the groups? Freya's words made Noah speechless. Noah did not think that there was any problem with crushing all the teams. There were not many elven users in this world who could do anything to Noah. And that was when Noah did not use his authority and Gate of Babylon. If he used his true strength, Noah felt that other than the Elven King, no one in this world could do anything to him. However, there was an extraordinary elven user in the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Renashubal, the Dark Elf King's successor who inherited the Dark Elf King's power. If the strongest sword dancer could unleash the full power of the Dark Elf King, even Noah didn't know how powerful she would be. But he was sure that even if Rin could not do anything to Noah, she could still make Noah unable to be distracted. At that time, as Noah's teammates, what would happen to Claire, Linley, and the others? Would they be defeated by Ren's teammates? You don't need power anymore, Freya said indifferently. Be a little considerate of your teammates. With that, Freya turned around and walked towards the forest. However, Freya's words alerted Noah to the situation. All along, no matter what difficulties Noah faced, he'd always relied on the formidable strength he'd tempered himself to overcome all difficulties and overcome all difficulties. It was practically impossible for him to encounter a decent opponent. But that did not mean that Noah only believed in his own strength and felt that he did not need the companionship of others. On the contrary, compared to strength, the importance of companions was more deeply ingrained in Noah's heart. After all, Noah was a child who grew up in fairy tale. Thinking of this, Noah stared at the 2 young ladies, Claire and Linley, who were somewhat confused. It seemed that it was necessary to cultivate a relationship with these 2 girls. Chapter 980. Not only was the Academy city at the foot of the mountain surrounded by the elven forest, but there was also a huge city wall. The interior of the Academy city was divided into 5 areas: fire, water, wind, earth, and holy, which coincided with the 5 elements. Among them, the water area was the place where the rich young ladies of the Academy enjoyed themselves. Not only were there many places for leisure and entertainment, but there were also jewelry stores, luxurious restaurants, and luxurious baths. The scale of the place was not inferior to the imperial capital of the Orsia Empire. The students of Alicia Elven Academy were quite fond of this place. As previously mentioned, under normal circumstances, the strength of an elven envoy would continuously decline after the age of 25, gradually losing their strength. Elven envoys who lost their strength could only retire. Then, in order to let others inherit their superior witch abilities, retired elven envoys would choose to marry pure-blooded nobles. Through generations of marriage, the elven envoy's bloodline would be strengthened. Therefore, those who could become elven envoys were basically nobles from famous families. Although not all elven envoys were from famous families, at least 80 to 90% of the elven envoys were from famous families, which was quite a high proportion. Therefore, the students of the Elven Academy were basically all young ladies from rich families. As the young ladies of famous families, these young ladies naturally would not be stingy with money. Of course, they wouldn't hesitate to patronize those entertainment venues with astounding expenses. Under such circumstances, it was rare to see Elven Academy students in the Wind area, which represented the commoner district. However, at this moment, 4 people wearing the uniform of the Alicia Elven Academy appeared in this area. The newcomers were naturally the team led by Noah. With Noah as the leader, Claire and Linley were led here by Noah. The remaining person was none other than Aster, who had transformed back into his human form. Speaking of which, why did we come to the Academy City at this time? Looking at the bustling streets, Claire seemed to be a little afraid of strangers. She shrunk her head and made a small protest to Noah. Although we've been exempted from classes today because of the team competition, isn't it better to discuss team combat instead of coming here to play? That's right. After Teacher Freya's words, if we don't develop some team spirit, we'll be laughed at. Lin Si-lei was also looking around. She looked a little uneasy, but she still put on a brave face. Besides, even if you want to play, you should go to the noble district of the Water District. Why are you coming to the commoner district of the Wind District? Seeing that Claire and Linley were more or less uneasy, Noah was secretly amused. It couldn't be helped. Because the Water District was the noble district, not many people went there. Even if there were, they were all young ladies from the Elven Academy. There weren't many men. On the other hand, there were men everywhere in the Wind Region Civilian District. As a pristine witch who wasn't used to men, it was only natural that Claire and Linley would behave like this. Speaking of which, when they first met, Linley didn't seem to be afraid of Noah at all, right? Now that he thought about it carefully, perhaps this young lady was just putting on a brave front. No matter what, it was Noah who brought Claire and Linley here. Today, Noah naturally had to play the role of a guardian angel. I also think that we should have a good discussion about team combat, but if we just do it like this, it's no different from talking on paper. Noah spread out his hands and said, "The so-called team spirit and teamwork are built on sufficient understanding. We just formed a team yesterday. If we don't understand each other, we can't even talk about cooperation, right? That's not wrong." Claire still looked a little hesitant. But what does coming to the Academy City have to do with understanding each other? I just feel that instead of being cooped up in the Academy, why don't we go out for a walk? It'll be easier for us to talk. Noah scratched his cheek. Well, actually it's also because I haven't been to the Academy City before. I more or less want to take a look around here. Is that so? Claire and Linley looked at each other and could only nod reluctantly. Then. All right. Hearing this, Noah suddenly smiled and turned his gaze to Aster, who had been silent but was also looking around. Is there anywhere Aster wants to go? No, I don't have any particular place I want to go. Aster shook his head. I've been sealed in the sword for hundreds of years. In these hundreds of years, the human world seems to have changed a lot. To be able to walk around and understand the current situation of this world is already enough for me. Is that so? Noah couldn't help but feel a sense of closeness towards Aster. One had to know that almost every time Noah entered a new world, he would feel rather perplexed about the current world's background and situation. Come to think of it, Aster's situation should be similar to Noah's. They were both filled with uncertainty about the current situation of the world. Then let's go find a good restaurant and have a good meal. Hearing Noah's words, apart from Aster who nodded, Claire and Linley both cheered. That's right. Let's hurry and find a place to sit. It seemed that these two young ladies were really nervous about the men on the street. Just like that, under Noah's lead, the group began to walk forward. Although it was a civilian area, there were many ordinary shops, restaurants, and other buildings. It looked like a shopping street. It was very lively. In the crowd, Noah, Claire, Lindley, and Aster walked on the side of the road, but they still couldn't avoid brushing shoulders with the people around them. Why are there so many men? Undoubtedly, there aren't so many people usually. Claire and Lindley, who were following behind Noah, kept looking around restlessly. They were like small animals that were afraid of strangers, making people feel that they were a little cute. Although Claire and Lindley were both first-rate elven users, and any random elven magic could knock down an ordinary man, in front of a man, these two girls were only pure and innocent young girls. Therefore, whenever a man passed by and got close to Claire or Lindley, the two girls would let out small cries of grief and snuggle tightly together. Although the people around them looked at them strangely, when they recognized Claire and Lindley's uniforms, they immediately understood the situation and left as if nothing had happened. Seeing that Claire and Lindley were as pitiful and cute as little sheep that had been thrown into a pack of wolves, Noah could only laugh bitterly. There's no other way. After saying that, Noah let go of Aster's hand and quickly held Claire and Lindley's hands, one in each hand. Whoa! Claire and Lindley cried out in surprise at almost the same time. When they realized that their hands were being held by Noah, their faces unexpectedly turned red at the same time with a pang sound, emitting light smoke. You! What are you doing? Casually holding a lady's hand. This is simply unforgivable. The two young ladies, who had never had such intimate contact with a man, both angrily rebuked Noah. Their pretty faces were bright red from beginning to end, making Noah wonder if Claire and Lindley would suddenly faint. Who told you to keep looking around? You'll get lost sooner or later like that, right? Noah laughed bitterly. Or do you think it's fine if you get lost in a crowd like this? Oh. Claire and Lindley shrunk their heads and could only lower their heads as if accepting their fate. Their faces were red as they let Noah hold their hands. On the side, Aster, who had been let go by Noah, stared at Noah like an abandoned little animal, making Noah feel a trace of guilt. Who told Noah to only have two hands? Chapter 981. Noah really wasn't very familiar with the Academy City. Originally, as students who had studied in Alicia Elven Academy for quite some time, Claire and Lindley should be more familiar with the Academy City than Noah and should be leading the way for Noah. However, they didn't know if it was because something special had happened today, but the streets were unusually lively, causing the number of male passers-by to increase exponentially. This made the two young ladies completely flustered and unable to control themselves. With no other choice, Noah could only hold Claire and Lindley's hands and have Aster walk in front of him so that they wouldn't get separated. He quickly found a restaurant and brought the two young ladies and an elven girl inside. Perhaps it was because there really was a special event today. Undoubtedly, there were so many people on the streets, but there were very few people in the restaurant. This allowed Claire and Lindley to finally breathe a sigh of relief. Why? Why are there so many people today? After finding a seat and sitting down, Claire immediately voiced her dissatisfaction. Could it be that there really is an event today? I haven't heard of it at all. Lindley sighed. Normally, Carol would definitely know something at this time. Unfortunately, she's not here today. Oh, right. Noah finally remembered and asked curiously. Why isn't Carol by your side today? In Alicia Elven Academy, the students were basically all young ladies from famous families. Even those students didn't have a maid by their side, but Lindley had a maid by her side. This proved that Lindley's family background was illustrious, and also proved that the maid wouldn't easily leave her master's side. In fact, Noah hadn't seen Lindley by herself before. She usually brought Carol along. Could it be that Carol wasn't by Linley's side because she had to participate in the team competition today? While Noah was making all kinds of guesses in his heart, Linley gave such an answer. Carol usually sleeps in the morning. If I don't wake her up, she'll sleep until night. Because there's a team competition today, I didn't wake her up. She's probably still sleeping, right? Noah was speechless. That maid not only needed her master to cook for her 3 meals, otherwise she would starve to death, but she also needed her master to wake her up. She felt that she was really a useless maid in all aspects. However, Carol's translation ability was truly amazing. Even when Lin Si-lei was being arrogant, she could clearly say what she was thinking without missing a single word. From a certain point of view, this could be considered an incredible skill, right? After getting an answer, Noah pulled out a seat and sat down. As if waiting for Noah, after Noah sat down, Aster, who had been obediently following beside Noah, quietly pulled out a seat and sat on it. She had to admit that Aster was really cute. Not only was her appearance frighteningly cute, but even her actions revealed a sense of cuteness. However, Aster was expressionless the whole time. Coupled with his cute little actions, he was really cute. Noah couldn't help but reach out his hand and rub Aster's head. Although Aster's face was still expressionless after being touched by Noah, a faint blush appeared on her pretty face as she spoke as if she was throwing a tantrum. Master, please don't be like this. Sorry, it's because Aster is too cute. Noah smiled teasingly. What? Could it be that Aster hates this? Please. Please don't tease me. Aster was a little bashful. That look made this cute elf girl even more adorable. Thus, Noah touched her even more happily. Although Aster said that, she didn't reject Noah's touch. Obviously, she didn't dislike Noah's intimacy. This made Claire and Lin Si-lei cast indignant gazes at Noah. It feels like you really love Aster. Undoubtedly, you weren't this gentle even when you were with us. Noah's hand movements paused slightly as he spoke helplessly. Who said that? Didn't I hold your hands just now because I was afraid you would get lost? Claire and Lin Si-lei's charming faces turned red again as they turned their heads away at the same time. That's because we were afraid of getting lost. We didn't want to hold hands with you. That's right. Fine. Noah rolled his eyes. You can do whatever you want, right? What should he say? Noah should be used to interacting with these pure and innocent young ladies, right? Although it was just holding hands and they had such a big reaction, he couldn't help but complain about it. That being said, we came here to get to know each other, right? Claire coughed dryly and glared at Noah. But, what should we do exactly? Yeah. Lin Si-lei twirled her hair with her fingers, looking nonchalant. Getting to know each other isn't something that can be done in one go, right? You have to let me know about you first. Noah supported his face with his hand and swept his gaze over Claire and Lin Si-lei. To be honest, I don't know anything about you two. I only know that you two have high elves as contract partners and are young ladies of famous families. Apart from that, I don't know anything else. No way. Lin Si-lei was startled and said with some uncertainty. Don't tell me you don't even know the surname Lorenfrost. Before I came to Alicia Elven Academy, I didn't even know the strongest sword dancer and strongest elven envoy who were famous throughout the continent. Noah looked at Lin Si-lei with a smile that wasn't a smile. Do you think it's possible for me to know Lorenfrost? Did you come from some countryside? Lin Si-lei was a bit angry. You don't even know the famous Lorenfrost family. That's unbelievable. Alright, at least I know that they are an incredible noble. Noah waved his hand and said perfunctorily before looking at Claire. What about you? Which incredible noble family did you come from? At this moment, Noah clearly felt it. The atmosphere had become strange. The anger on Lin Si Lei's face faded completely and became a bit heavy. On the other hand, Claire lowered her head, her face full of malice, making the atmosphere even more solemn. Seeing Claire and Lin Si Lei's behavior, Noah couldn't help but think of the disgust the elves gave Claire during the team competition in the morning. Noah's intuition told him that this matter didn't seem to be that simple. What's wrong? Noah frowned. Did I ask something I shouldn't have? This. Lin Si Lei stuttered. I think it's better if we talk about other issues. That's enough, Linley. Claire interrupted Linley's words and raised her head to look straight at Noah. Anyway, you'll know about this matter sooner or later, so I might as well tell you. Saying this, Claire reached into the collar of her uniform and took out a small necklace with a silver lock. It was a necklace with a gem shining with red light in the middle. A coat of arms was carved in the gem. It was a coat of arms with the head of a flaming lion roaring at the sky. Looking at this necklace, Noah asked in confusion. Is there anything strange about this necklace? You really don't know anything. Claire glared at Noah and then sighed and said in a low voice. This is the coat of arms of the Duke Elstian family. Elstian? Noah was confused at first, but suddenly realized something after a while. Noah thought of a person he had talked about with Gray and Vaz in the dean's office yesterday. Rubia Elstian. She betrayed the Fire Elf King and stole the strongest flame elf from the Elf King's temple, the Elf of Calamity. You? Noah said in shock. You're not from the Elstian family, are you? That's right. Claire lowered her head and said. The elf concubine of Calamity, Rubia Elstian, is my sister. Now, Noah understood everything. Chapter 982. The Elf Concubine of Calamity. The citizens of the Audisia Empire gave this title to the elf concubine who betrayed the Fire Elf King. Rather than calling it a title, it was more like a curse. Lubia had betrayed the Elf King of Fire and caused the Elf King of Fire to be enraged. The Elf King of Fire had sent down heavenly fire and almost burned the entire territory of the Kingdom of Audisia to ashes. The citizens of the Kingdom of Audisia, who had endured the disaster for an entire year, only had hatred and curses in their hearts. Because of this, the Elstian family of the Fire Elf concubine Lubia was stripped of their title and territory. Even Lubia's parents, the current Duke and Duchess of the Elstian family, were thrown into prison, never to be released for the rest of their lives. And Claire was actually a member of Duke Elstian's family. And the elf concubine of Calamity was Claire's biological sister? Didn't that mean that Claire was the second miss of the Duke's family that had fallen overnight? Duke Elstian's family has long since declined. My parents were also sent to prison because of my sister's matter. Only I was spared from punishment. Claire tightly gripped the necklace engraved with the Elstian family's coat of arms as she spoke self-deprecatingly. If it wasn't for the fact that I was still young at the time and the dean had done a lot of work, I would definitely have been thrown into prison like my family. As the strongest elf envoy on the continent, Grey Vath had not only won the Elven Sword Dance Festival 24 years ago, she had also made great contributions in the Lambard War that had swept through the entire continent. In addition, Grey Vath had once been the leader of the 12 Knights. In the Audisia Empire, this witch's words carried a lot of weight. Of course, no matter how much weight Grey Vath had, she couldn't protect the entire Elstian family. The only thing Grey Vath could do was protect the young Claire and introduce her to the Elven Academy. It's all thanks to the Dean that I had the chance to participate in this year's Elven Sword Dance Festival. Claire's eyes were filled with determination. If I can obtain victory in the Elven Sword Dance Festival and allow the Kingdom of Osea to receive the protection of the Elven King, then I can make up for my mistakes. Even if I can't restore the House of Duke Elstian to its former glory, my parents can still be released from prison. For this, I need great power. Claire wanted a fairy that wouldn't lose to anyone, just to obtain power. On the other hand, Claire only wanted power in order to win the Elven Sword Dance Festival. For his parents. For the sake of his family. Also. Claire bit her lips slightly, her eyes becoming uncertain. I also want to know why my sister betrayed the Elf King. The Elven envoy who won the Elven Sword Dance Festival could ask the Elven King to fulfill a wish for them. In order to find out the truth behind her sister's betrayal, Claire needed that wish. Noah also understood why the elves had looked at Claire with such disgust in the morning. It was only because Claire was the sister of the elf concubine of Calamity. It was only because Claire's family had brought them a great disaster. That was all. Therefore, there wasn't a single person in the kingdom of Osea who didn't hate the elf concubine of Calamity. Naturally, there wasn't a single person in the kingdom of Osea who had a good impression of the elf concubine of Calamity. Alright, you already know my identity. Claire put away the necklace and turned her head away. If you want to kick me out of the team, you better do it now. Claire. Lindsley opened her mouth, as if wanting to say something, but when she saw Claire's expression of wanting to cry but forcefully holding it in, she didn't know what to say. The eldest daughter of the Lorenfrost family always seemed to be at odds with Claire and often argued with her, but Noah could see that Lindsley actually cared a lot about Claire. Otherwise, if she really didn't have a good relationship with Claire, Lindsley wouldn't have agreed to join Noah's team. No matter what, these two were childhood sweethearts who grew up together, weren't they? How could their relationship really be bad? Seeing Claire's nervous expression as if she was waiting for a trial, Noah couldn't help but laugh. Since it's like this. Noah smiled indifferently. Then let's make a decision. Claire's delicate body trembled slightly, and she even closed her eyes. Obviously, this girl was actually very afraid that Noah would kick her out of the team. After all, as the younger sister of the elf concubine of Calamity, if she was kicked out of the team by Noah, there might really be no one in the Elven Academy who would team up with her. At that time, Claire, who couldn't gather 5 teammates, would naturally miss the opportunity to perform the Elven Sword Dance, and her biggest wish would be completely crushed. Wait. Wait. Lindsley finally couldn't help but speak. I think, however, before Lindsley could finish speaking, she was interrupted by Noah. Although I'm the team leader of this team, I've never thought of being a dictator. Naturally, I'll have to listen to the opinions of the team members when it comes to retrenchment. Noah coughed deliberately and said with a straight face. Let's start voting now. Regarding the matter of kicking Claire out of the team, feel free to raise any ideas. As soon as he said this, Claire immediately froze. Lindsley was also startled, but immediately reacted. She also coughed, crossed her arms, and said insincerely. Ma, although I personally feel that it's a bit inappropriate to be in the same team as a strong opponent like Claire, in terms of strength, this fire cat is still a bit strong. If she stays, our chances of winning will be a bit higher. In other words, Lindsley is in favor of Claire staying. Noah nodded as if he had taken an opinion, then looked at Aster. Aster, what do you think? Hearing Noah's question, Aster, who was swinging his little feet in boredom, stopped his movements, raised his head, and glanced at Claire. That fire cat spirit is a very powerful spirit. If it's here, it'll be of help to Master. Does Aster also approve of Claire staying? Noah suddenly laughed. Then 2 votes in favor of Claire staying. Even if I were to oppose, it wouldn't matter, right? Only now did Claire react. You. As if she didn't want others to see her disappointing side, Claire patted her cheeks and lightly snorted. You should be glad that I'm here. As long as Scarlet and I are here, no matter what kind of enemy it is, it won't be a problem. Seeing Claire's stubborn appearance, Noah and Lindsley looked at each other and suddenly laughed. Don't laugh. Claire's pretty face reddened, and she said to Noah in embarrassment and anger. Speaking of which, you keep talking about us. Why don't you talk about yourself? Me? Noah blinked. I come from the countryside where I don't know anything. Even like that, you want to know about me. That's why I want to know about you. Lindsley said angrily. I want to know what kind of place the countryside is that even the Lorenfrost family doesn't know about. That's right, that's right. Claire nodded repeatedly. You don't even know about the strongest sword dancer and the strongest spirit user. Where did you come from? I also want to know about Master. Aster also looked at Noah in a rare manner. Please tell me. Okay. Noah rubbed his temples. I grew up in a guild, just like that. Noah began to tell Claire, Lindsley, and Aster about himself. Of course, Noah didn't say anything that wasn't convenient to say. He only said that he came from another continent overseas. Moreover, he changed his archmage to a spirit user, and told them a story that was 90% true and 10% false. Sunlight shone down from the sky, enveloping an open-air balcony. On the balcony, there was a pure white round table. On the side of the table, a young girl was drinking black tea while holding a report. Written on the report was the information on the sword dance duel between Noah and Lotus. He actually performed the same sword dance as the strongest sword dancer, and his skill and power aren't below her. The young girl's eyes flashed, and not long after, a beautiful smile bloomed on her face. My chance, perhaps, has come. Chapter 983. In a vast open space in the forest, withered yellow leaves covered the ground in a thick layer, like a yellow carpet. 5 elven users wearing the uniform of the Alesia Elven Academy were standing back to back in a small circle. Their hands were tightly gripping the magic devices transformed from elves, and their faces were filled with nervousness. Come out. Among them, one was clearly the captain. She had long hair that reached her waist, and her eyes were like torches as she scanned the surrounding forest. I know you're here. Hurry up and come out. Just as the long-haired elven user's voice fell, a figure slowly walked out from the thicket in front of them. In his hand was a silver holy sword. He was wearing the male uniform of the Alesia Elven Academy. Noah casually walked out of the woods. He looked at the 5 elf users who were standing in a small circle in front of him and smiled faintly. As expected of a team formed by senior students. Not only are all of you able to activate your magic devices, but you're also able to quickly discover me hiding in the surroundings. Of course, it's also because I didn't intentionally hide myself. You finally appeared. A male elven user. The long-haired elven user slowly took a step forward, and a phosphorescent divine power gushed out from his body. At the same time, the long-haired elven user waved his hand, and the other 4 elven users immediately surrounded their captain in a seemingly casual but actually quite ingenious formation. They were able to deal with attacks from all directions at any time. The elven magic devices in their hands were pointed at Noah, and their eyes were filled with hostility. When this formation was formed, the long-haired elven user's confidence seemed to have skyrocketed. He raised his head and said to Noah proudly, "No matter how strong you are, there are 5 of us here. Don't tell me you want to fight all 5 of us by yourself." "Fight all 5 of us by myself." Noah looked at the long-haired elven user's proud appearance, and a trace of a smile flashed through his pitch-black eyes. "Actually, it's not impossible. Arrogant fellow." The long-haired elven user's face stiffened, and his voice became harsh. "If that's the case, then don't blame us for being impolite." As soon as he finished speaking, the 4 companions of the long-haired elf ambassador seemed to have received some kind of order. They simultaneously gripped their elven devices and rushed out. The phosphorescent divine might surging around them was channeled into the elven devices in their hands. With a deep sonic boom that tore through the air, they ferociously attacked Noah at the same time. The four of them each occupied the four positions in front of Noah. Unless Noah retreated, he could only choose to endure the combined attacks of the four of them. As for the leader, the long-haired elf, he began to chant an elf magic incantation. Once Noah retreated, the long-haired elven envoy eyeing him covetously from behind would immediately activate elven magic, causing Noah, who was unable to defend himself while dodging the combined attack of the four elven envoys, to suffer a vicious blow. Unfortunately, the elven envoy didn't know that Noah didn't need to guard against elven magic at all due to his incantation resistance. However, Noah didn't choose to retreat either. He ignored the incoming attacks of the four elven envoys, and his eyes were firmly fixed on the long-haired elven envoy behind him. On the holy sword in his hand, a gentle radiance revolved around the blade. Just as the elven device, which contained a powerful divine might energy, was about to hit Noah, an accident occurred. In the air, accompanied by a sharp sound of wind breaking, a whip carrying scorching flames fell from the sky, and smashed in front of Noah and the four elven envoys who were about to pounce on Noah. Bang! As the long whip carrying scorching flames ferociously struck the ground, a burst of violent flames rose from the place where the long whip hit without the slightest warning. It set off a flame vortex, and spread out, completely burning the thick carpet of withered leaves on the ground. Ah! The four elven envoys who were charging towards Noah were struck by the flame vortex that rose from the ground, and all of them were shaken back as if they were blown away by a gust of wind. What? The long-haired elven envoy was shocked. On a tree not far away, Claire, who was tightly grasping the long whip of flames, revealed a victorious smile at the long-haired elven envoy. Beside her, Lindsay lay, whose whole body was fluctuating with a cold mist, held a longbow that looked like it was cast from beautiful ice crystals, and the bowstring was fully drawn. Cold ice fang, pierced through the enemy, the incantation written in elven language reverberated in the air, causing the cold mist fluctuating around Lindsay lay to condense on her elven device, turning into 4 ice arrows aimed at the 4 elven envoys who were blown away by the gust of wind. Not good. The long-haired elven envoy's expression finally changed greatly. However, it was already too late to react. Whoosh! In the next instant, 4 ice arrows swept out from the air in unison, stirring up a neat and sharp sound of wind. They turned into streaks of light and cut through the air, landing on the chests of the 4 elven envoys with extreme precision. Poochie! Without any suspense, the 4 ice arrows directly pierced through the chests of the 4 elven envoys, causing them to let out a muffled groan. Their bodies were nailed to the ground by the 4 ice arrows, and their heads tilted to one side as they fainted. The instant the 4 elven ambassadors' bodies were pierced by the ice arrows and nailed to the ground, a black shadow flashed out from the rapidly rising vortex of flames. Like a ghost, it appeared in front of the long-haired elven ambassador whose expression had greatly changed, and suddenly smiled at the long-haired elven ambassador. Although it's not impossible for one to face 5, it's a pity that if I take away the opportunity of those prideful young ladies to perform, I'll be blamed to death. After saying this, Noah's arm shook, and the silver holy sword wrapped in a gentle light pierced through the air, piercing through the chest of the long-haired elven envoy. This way, we'll have 3 consecutive victories in the team competition. In the hallway of the academy, Claire said as she walked forward, a trace of uncontrollable joy in her eyes. If we continue to maintain this, we'll definitely be able to squeeze into the top 3 before the Elven Sword Dance Festival and qualify for the competition. Ever since the heart-to-heart talk in the Academy City a week ago, coupled with Noah's deliberate nurturing, Noah, Claire, and Lindsay's team awareness and teamwork had improved manyfold. Now, Noah didn't need to use much of his strength at all. He only needed to use strength similar to ordinary elven envoys to cooperate with Claire and Lindsley. Even the top 10 teams of the Elven Academy wouldn't have a hard time winning. After all, although Claire and Lindsley were both lower-grade students, their grades and strength weren't inferior to the upper-grade students, and even surpassed them. Moreover, their contracted elves were high-grade elves that ordinary elven envoys couldn't have. Their strength could be imagined. To be honest, Noah hadn't thought that Claire and Lindsley's strength would be stronger than the majority of the upper-grade students. Previously, the only reason he'd invited Claire and Lindsley to join the team was because these two young ladies had interacted with Noah before. Now, Noah knew that he'd found a treasure. As long as they were properly nurtured, Claire and Lindsley would definitely become outstanding elven envoys that could be put on the stage. It was the same even in the Fairy Sword Dance Festival, which was said to be the largest scale. If this situation continued, attending the Elven Sword Dance Festival was only a matter of time. Now, what we need to worry about is no longer the ranking, but the problem of teammates. Noah shrugged. Even if we can squeeze into the top 3, if we can't gather 5 teammates, we still won't be able to attend the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Allah, you don't have to worry about this at all. Lindsley smiled sweetly. As long as we can squeeze into the top 3, there will be plenty of people who will want to join our team. As they chatted and laughed, the group arrived in front of a bulletin board. Chapter 984. At this moment, there were quite a few students gathered around the bulletin board in front of the corridor. However, when they saw Noah, Claire, and Lindley walking over, the students immediately scattered like insects, slipping to the side. Upon closer inspection, some of these students were looking at Noah with curiosity and fear, while others were looking at Claire with disgust and hatred. Even Lindley was frowned upon by some of the students, their expressions extremely obvious. The students who looked at Noah with curiosity and fear were because Noah was a male elf. The students who looked at Claire with disgust and hatred were naturally because Claire was the younger sister of the Elven Princess of Calamity. As for Lindley, there didn't seem to be any problems on the surface, but this young miss was also a student of the Crow class with many problematic children. It was only natural that she would be treated differently by the students who thought themselves to be honest. Thinking about it this way, Noah's team really was full of problematic people. Even though these problems were not caused by them, it was true that these problems were not caused by them. After staying in Alicia Elven Academy for almost a month, Noah was already used to the gazes of others. Don't be fooled by the fact that the students kept a respectful distance from Noah. In fact, there were also bold witches who were curious about Noah because he was a male elf. At least, ever since he started participating in the Academy's group matches and appeared in the sights of the students, Noah would occasionally find pink envelopes filled with letters and strange gifts and snacks in places he passed by. Many times, Noah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Even Noah was used to it, not to mention Claire and Lindley, who had been in the Academy for a longer time. At that moment, the three of them arrived in front of the bulletin board under the gazes of others as if nothing had happened. On the bulletin board set up on the walls of the corridor, there were many things that the students needed to pay attention to. For example, important matters and notices related to the Elven Sword Dance Festival. For example, the date of the group match arranged by the Academy and the name list of both sides. Another example was that the Academy's rankings were also set up here for the students to find their own rankings. In addition, there were pieces of parchment pasted on the bulletin board. On those parchments, there was a list of missions arranged according to the difficulty of the missions. Students were not only able to obtain ranking points by winning the team competition, but they could also accept missions from the Academy and complete the corresponding missions to obtain ranking points. Most of these missions were simple safety missions entrusted by the residents of the Academy city and the nearby villages. Therefore, there were almost no high-level missions accompanied by danger. Of course, it was just almost. there were still some truly dangerous missions. At the top of the bulletin board, there were missions of the highest level. A mission to seal the elves. Linley saw the mission at the top of the notice board at first glance, and said eagerly, "Linley, shouldn't we also complete some high-level missions?" Noah, Claire, and Linley's team had only been formed a week ago. A newly formed team had to go through 2 or 3 group matches before they could accept missions. Otherwise, without a certain amount of combat experience, the academy wouldn't dare to let the students go out alone to carry out missions, and return with a bloody head or even their lives lost. Within this week, Noah's team had gone through a total of 3 group matches. In the first match, Noah completely crushed his opponents and won. In the second match, Linley and Linley both won with active performances. In the third round, the 3 of them finally looked like they were fighting as a team. With excellent teamwork, they obtained victory. It was likely that the academy had seen the performance of Noah's team and wouldn't reject Noah's team from accepting missions. Unfortunately, before Noah could reject this suggestion, Claire spoke up. "We are now in an important period of time to develop teamwork and teamwork. Instead of wasting time on missions, why don't we think of some battle strategies? Actual combat is the fastest way to improve, isn't it?" Linley, who'd been splashed with cold water, said in dissatisfaction. "Instead of cultivating teamwork through battles with those greenhouse flowers in the academy, why don't we fight against high-level sealed spirits? That way, we might improve faster, right? But that's also very dangerous, isn't it?" Claire firmly opposed. "Even if nothing happens to us, if we get injured and can't participate in the group matches later, the gains won't make up for the losses." Allah. Linley immediately looked at Claire with a provocative look. "Could it be that you're scared?" "Who did you say was scared?" Claire glared at Linley. "I just don't think there's a need to cater to your actions of taking on dangerous missions just to be in the limelight." I'm not doing it to be in the limelight." Linley was also furious. "I'm thinking for the team." Seeing Claire and Linley suddenly quarrel for no reason, Noah couldn't help but feel helpless. There was no helping it. The same scene had already happened who knew how many times this week. And Noah could see it. Not only did Claire and Linley's relationship not show any signs of worsening, it was actually much better than the average person. It was just that these 2 dishonest young ladies seemed to only know how to express their feelings for each other in this way. And so, it evolved into this every time. And so, Noah simply decided not to understand these 2 young ladies' daily friendly quarrel to improve their relationship. He raised his eyes and looked at the rankings on the bulletin board. Very quickly, Noah found his team's ranking. 11th place, Fairy Tale. That was naturally the team name that Noah had chosen. The 3 victories in the group matches allowed the Fairy Tale team to surpass many ordinary teams in one fell swoop and began to show their talents. Don't think that winning 3 matches in the group matches would allow them to jump to 11th place quickly. Actually, generally speaking, teams with a bit of strength would rise quickly in the early stages. This was because the ranking points obtained after winning in the group competition varied. Winning against a team that was ranked higher than them would naturally result in higher ranking points. Conversely, it would be less. Noah's Fairy Tale team had only been established a week ago. At that time, most of the teams had already participated in several matches and had begun who knows how long to compete for the rankings. They had more or less accumulated some points and were ranked at the top of the rankings. Defeating these 3 teams allowed the Fairy Tale team to gain a lot of points and jump to 11th place in one fell swoop. But it was not so simple after that. Unless they won a match against a team in the top 10. By the way, the ranking points were not directly recorded on the team, but on every fairy user in the team. Regardless of whether they had won the competition or completed the mission, they had obtained ranking points. These ranking points would be evenly distributed to every elven user in the team. Then, the ranking points of the elven users in the team would be added up to calculate the team's ranking. On the rankings, Noah also saw the names of the top 3 teams. Oh. Noah raised his eyebrows. Alice's team is actually ranked 3rd. Isn't that normal? Claire, who was quarreling with Linley, seemed to be annoyed. She ignored the noisy Linley and turned to speak to Noah. Students who are able to join the Wind King Knight Regiment and maintain the order and security of the Academy are all outstanding fairy users. Without strength, it is impossible to pass the selection. Alice's strength is among the best in this academy, and with the addition of those outstanding members of the Wind King Knight Regiment, of course her ranking wouldn't be too low. That's true. Noah nodded, his gaze sweeping over the first place. But when Noah saw the name of the first place, Noah was stunned. Versilia Eva Faringelto. Noah was stunned for 2 reasons. One was that the name of the first place was actually not the name of the team, but a person's name. The other was the surname of this name. Faringelto. Wasn't that Alice's surname? Chapter 985. On the side, Claire and Linley seemed to have noticed that Noah was paying attention to something and immediately glanced at each other. What's wrong? Claire asked directly. Are you very concerned about Versilia? If you want to say that I am concerned, then I am concerned, right? Noah looked at the first place on the ranking list and asked. This Versilia's surname is Frangerto. Could it be that she is from that Frangerto? In this week, although Noah couldn't say that he completely understood this world, he had at least grasped some information about the family backgrounds of those close to him. Claire, for example, was a descendant of the already declining Duke Elstian family. Linley was from the Lorenfrost family, a famous family with a long history. They had lived in the ice border for a long time, but in terms of status, they weren't inferior to the Duke Elstian family at all. As for Alice, her Frangelto family was a famous family of the martial arts faction. Not only had the Frangerto family occupied an extremely high position in the military of the Empire for generations, but the current Duke Frangerto was also the chief military advisor of the Empire. He had been very active in the Lombard War and was regarded as a hero of the Empire. His status wasn't lower than that of Grey and Vaz at all. For such a person, not to mention ordinary nobles, even Claire and Linley's families had to pay their respects when they were at their peak. The members of the Empire's royal family also had to be respectful in front of them and didn't dare to slight them in the slightest. One could imagine how much power and influence the family of such a hero had. It was also because she was born in such a famous warrior family that Alice had set her goal as an outstanding knight and was still working hard. Could it be that this Versilia was also from the Frangelto family? Didn't that mean, that's right, Versilia is Alice's adopted sister. Claire's words confirmed Noah's guess in his heart. Originally, Versilia was only the descendant of a lower noble family that declined after the Lombard War, but her talent as an elven user was quite outstanding. She once participated in the last Elven Sword Dance Festival at the age of 15 and was adopted by the Frangerto family as a daughter. Sister E. Noah blinked. Who would have thought that Alice actually had an adopted sister in the academy? Then why haven't I seen it yet? Versilia is currently on a mission. As if she knew the doubts in Noah's heart, Claire said seriously. Not long ago, Versilia accepted a high-level crusade mission. Now, she's in the middle of a crusade against demonkin elves. A demoness-level sprite. Noah's heart skipped a beat. Demon-level sprites. It wasn't a certain level or species of elves, but an assessment made by humans based on the strength of the elves. No matter what rank, level, or type of sprite it was, as long as it met a certain level of strength, it would be crowned with the level set by the humans. Under normal circumstances, the elves that elven envoys could control or deal with on their own would not enter this level evaluation. If an ordinary elven envoys couldn't control or deal with on their own, the elves whose strength was comparable to a regular elven knight team of an empire could enter this level evaluation. The so-called demoness level sprites referred to such powerful sprites that elven envoys couldn't control or deal with on their own under normal circumstances. Unless it was an elven envoys on the level of the 12 knight generals. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to deal with a demoness level sprite alone. It was said that above the demoness level sprites, there was a type of demon god level sprite. That was a type of sprite that, once enraged, could destroy a city in a matter of time. Among the sprites recognized by humans, their strength was definitely at the highest level. In the recognition, this type of sprite couldn't be dealt with on their own. Of course, there were always exceptions to everything. For example, Gray and Vaz had dealt with demon god level sprites more than once. Not to mention demon god level sprites, demoness level sprites weren't targets that ordinary elven envoys could deal with on their own. And elven envoys who were still in the academy and hadn't even become regular elven knights would actually deal with such sprites on their own. Wasn't that the same as courting death? That Versilia is that strong. Even Lindsley became serious, which was rare for her. During the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago, Versilia already received a recommendation and was listed as a reserve knight of the 12 knight generals. As long as she is willing to serve the Empire, she can become a member of the 12 knight generals at any time after she graduates. And that was only 3 years ago. Claire raised her beautiful eyebrows. Now that 3 years have passed, Versilia has definitely become much stronger than she was back then. It would be impossible for a normal student to take on a demon-level elf by herself, but she would definitely be able to do it successfully. By the way, Versilia's contracted sprite is the same as your sword sprite, a sealed sprite. Lindsley reminded. Moreover, at present, she is the strongest elven envoys in the Elven Academy. Hearing Claire and Lindsley's words, Noah nodded slightly. The strongest elven envoys in the Academy. To be able to deal with a demoness level sprite on her own, become a reserve knight of the 12 knight generals 3 years ago, tame a berserk sealed sprite, and reach first place on the Academy's rankings by herself, one could only imagine the strength of this elven envoys. Just as Noah secretly committed the name Versilia to memory, Claire's tone suddenly became relaxed. But for you, she shouldn't be an opponent you can't deal with, right? That's true. Lindsley's tone also revealed a sense of relaxation. After all, even though Versilia is very strong, there are still people who are much stronger than her. Wasn't she defeated by Liena Subble in the preliminary round of the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago? Oh. Noah raised his head and looked at Lindsley. In other words, in the Elven Sword Dance Festival 3 years ago, Versilia, who had high hopes, was defeated in the preliminary round. It can't be helped. That woman's opponent was Liena Subble. Lindsley shrugged. In the face of the strongest sword dancer, even the 12 most outstanding elven envoys of the Empire, the reserves of the 12 knight generals were not enough. At that time, Versilia was defeated by Liena Subble in one blow. Claire looked at Noah. It's been 3 years since the last Elven Sword Dance Festival. Versilia must have become stronger. In this academy, there shouldn't be a second person who can compete with her except for you, who can compete with the strongest sword dancer, right? Noah nodded absent-mindedly. Speaking of which, Alice seemed to have said that she had a roommate in her room. Because she was on a mission, she wasn't in the academy. Could that so-called roommate be Versilia? At this moment, a voice suddenly burst into the scene. Oh. You're here. As she spoke, Freya walked over from the other side of the corridor with a book in her hand. She spoke directly to Noah, who was standing in front of the notice board. Just in time. Go to the office, the dean is looking for you. Grave Oz. Noah was stunned. At the same time, in a corner of the academy city, the highest-ranking dark elf wearing a dark-colored robe appeared quietly. "You're finally here." The one who spoke was not the dark elf girl, but a youth. A youth with dark skin, dark red hair, and bright red runes all over his body. "Let's get to the point." The youth stared at the dark elf's beautiful face. "The male elven envoy who is the Demon King's successor is in that academy, right?" "I never said that he is the Demon King's successor." Lastia pursed her lips and smiled. "I only said that there is a male elven envoy in that academy." "That's enough." A cruel smile appeared on the youth's face. "As a male elven envoy, let me show him who is worthy of the title of Demon King." Chapter 986. After parting ways with Claire and Linley, Noah went straight to the dean's office. "Why are you looking for me at this time?" Ever since Noah was able to use the elf device the moment he summoned Aster, Gray and Vath had never looked for Noah alone. According to Gray and Vath, whether it was the sword dance or the elf user, she had taught Noah everything she could. She didn't teach him anything else. After all, Noah's strength was higher than Gray and Vath. What Gray and Vath could teach Noah, other than the sword dance and the elf user that Noah didn't know, she couldn't teach him anything else even if she wanted to. Therefore, Gray and Vath only taught Noah the basic sword dance and the elf user. She also taught Noah the absolute sword skills that belonged to the highest level of the sword dance. The rest was up to Noah to figure out, so as not to limit Noah's possibilities since he was already stronger than Gray and Vath. "Don't tell me that the witch will suddenly attack when I go over." Noah took out a weapon from the back of his uniform. It was a short sword that was similar in size to a dagger. Upon closer inspection, it was a miniature version of the Demon Slayer. In fact, it was indeed the genuine Demon Slayer. It was just that the holy sword that had once killed the Demon King had shrunk in size and was being carried by Noah. "Aster has worked hard enough in the team competition. That's why I wanted him to transform into this form and have a good rest." Noah held the short sword that the Demon Slayer had transformed into and smiled helplessly. "If possible, I really don't want to wake Aster up." If Aster didn't wake up, then the short sword in Noah's hand wouldn't be able to compete with the highest level of noble phantasm. It would even be relatively weak compared to normal weapons. Of course, if Noah imbued it with holy aura, Aster would immediately sense it and wake up to unleash the true power of the Demon Slayer. However, Aster was resting now. Noah really didn't want to wake her up because of the witch's prank. After putting the short sword that Aster had transformed into back to his waist, he put down his uniform and covered it. Noah came to the dean's office and knocked twice. Not long after, a calm and deep voice sounded from inside. "Come in." Noah opened the door and walked into the dean's office. However, at the next moment, the scene that appeared in front of Noah made him feel a little surprised. Because in the office, there wasn't only Gray and Vaz alone. In front of the luxurious desk that Gray and Vaz used, a girl was standing there. As Noah came in, she turned around and looked into Noah's eyes. It was a young girl with long, beautiful purple hair wearing a black dress. Her appearance revealed a mature charm and a stunning feeling. The girl's eyes were the same color as her hair. There was a hint of watery feeling in her eyes. She had an outstanding temperament and an elegant aura. The first impression that she gave was basically the same as Linsley. She looked like a noble lady who had an amazing upbringing since she was young. However, Noah didn't know if it was an illusion. Noah felt that in front of him, this girl with an elegant temperament, there seemed to be a hint of mischievousness in the depths of her eyes. This proved that this girl didn't seem to follow the rules as strictly as she looked on the surface. It was unknown if she had sensed Noah's thoughts, but the girl only smiled sweetly and placed her hands behind her back. She bent down slightly and raised her eyes slightly, allowing her gaze to look at Noah from bottom to top. It was quite an adorable sight. "You're that rumored male elf user, right?" With a clear voice like a water droplet, the girl tilted her head and looked at Noah curiously. "It doesn't seem to be as exaggerated as the rumors. You're actually quite good-looking, right?" "Rumors? Don't tell me it's the rumor of having multiple heads, multiple arms, and multiple legs." Noah thought of that rumor as if his stomach was hurting. He smiled bitterly at the girl. "If it's possible, can you please not look at me with the description of the rumors?" Noah could imagine how exaggerated the rumors would be with his special identity. Therefore, it was best not to ask this question here. As long as she didn't treat him as the description of the rumors, Noah would be satisfied. However, the girl looked straight at Noah, and the smile on her face became more or less thought-provoking. "Then, could it be that the rumor about you being able to compete with the strongest sword dancer is false?" Hearing this, Noah didn't know how to respond to the girl's words. Hee hee. The girl pursed her lips and smiled. "It seems that this rumor isn't false." Perhaps feeling that the time had come, Gray and Vath spoke at the right time. "Let me introduce you." After speaking, Gray and Vath looked at Noah. "The one in front of you is the second princess of the Austrian Empire, Fayanna Rayodija. I'm Fayanna Rayodija, who is about to transfer to this academy." The girl called Fayanna by Gray and Vath lifted her skirt and bowed to Noah. "You can just call me Fayanna." However, Noah was more or less speechless. The second princess of the Austrian Empire. In other words, this young lady wasn't a noble's daughter, but a real princess. This was the first time Noah saw a real princess. Seeing Noah's surprised expression, Fayanna smiled indifferently and said, "Don't be a stranger. After I chose to enter this academy, it's equivalent to me giving up my identity as the second princess. Therefore, you can just treat me as an ordinary transfer student." Hearing Fayanna's words, Noah couldn't help but recall. Although there were many large and small countries in this world, these countries only dominated the continent at best and did not dominate the world. The one who truly reigned at the top of this world was not the emperor of any country, but the king of elves who managed the elements of this world. In front of the elven king, the emperor was just a mortal. As long as the elven king showed a little mercy, the country where the emperor lived would have good weather and the country would be prosperous. On the contrary, as long as the elven king was angry, even the most powerful country would be destroyed in an instant. Because of this, all princesses who were born in the royal family would be targeted by the country to serve the elven concubines of the 5 elven kings. They would receive the necessary training in the institution that specialized in cultivating elven concubines, the Divine Ritual Institute. If Fayanna was really a princess, she should have entered the Divine Parliament to cultivate instead of coming here to study as an elven concubine. 4 years ago, after the elven concubine of Calamity who betrayed the Fire Elven King disappeared, in order to appease the Elven King's anger, the Audisia Empire elected an excellent witch concubine to replace the former elven concubine and inherit the position of elven concubine, Grey Vath suddenly said. At that time, the one who was elected was the second princess of the empire, Princess Fayanna. However, I didn't choose to become the elven concubine. I even announced that I gave up my qualification as the successor of the elven concubine and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Fayanna still had an indifferent expression and said with a smile. If Lady Rubia was called the elven concubine of Calamity because she betrayed the elven king, then I betrayed the expectations of the people of the empire. From that time on, people called me that. The lost elven concubine. Fayanna laughed. That's me. Noah was silent. Why didn't Fayanna become the elven concubine? Becoming the elven concubine who served the elven king was a supreme status. Even the emperor had to lower his head. However, Rubia betrayed the elven king, and Fayanna rejected the position of elven concubine. It was really puzzling. There must be a reason behind this, right? However, that wasn't something Noah could ask about. At least, not now. A puzzled expression surfaced on her pretty face. If that's the case, why is the princess with you? Seeing that Alice finally remembered him, Noah scratched his cheek and sighed. You should ask Her Royal Highness the Princess about this. Your Highness. Alice was slightly taken aback. I asked for it. Fianna smiled mischievously. Because I am a little interested in what kind of life Noah is living in such a heterosexual academy, I asked Noah to take me to his room to have a look. Saying this, Fianna looked at Alice with a smile that wasn't a smile. But I didn't expect that Noah is actually living with the Faringelto family's knight, the granddaughter of the Empire's hero. It really surprised me. Please don't misunderstand. Alice said with a little panic. There is absolutely no impure relationship between the opposite sex in this. We are living together because of safety concerns. Safety concerns? Fianna teased. A man and a woman living alone in a room, no matter how you think about it, it's not very safe, right? Perhaps because of Fianna's ambiguous expression, Alice's face suddenly turned red and she stared at Noah. If this man dares to do anything to me, I will definitely make him into a potato stew. Why is it a potato stew? Noah couldn't help but ridicule. I'm a potato. Or meat. He didn't know if it was because of Alice's training in cooking, but once this overly serious knight got angry, she would usually threaten to make the other party into various dishes. Although Noah didn't know if there was a need to be afraid of this kind of threat. On the other hand, Fianna winked at Alice. But isn't classmate Noah able to fight against that Renesubble head-on? Do you have the confidence to stop this kind of Noah from doing bad things? Alice was speechless again. After a while, she revealed a determined expression. I'm a knight of the Frangelto family, and also the head of the Wind King Knights. No matter how strong the opponent is, I won't watch him do bad things. Really? Fianna exclaimed. You are indeed a knight of noble character and unquestionable integrity. Hey. Noah couldn't help but say. When did I have the premonition of doing bad things? Don't take it seriously, okay? Hearing this, Alice and Fianna glanced at each other, and then they burst out laughing at the same time. Right. Alice suddenly said to Fianna. Since you've transferred to this academy, which class is Princess Fianna in? I'm the lost elf concubine. Fianna smiled leisurely. Of course, a problematic person like me will be transferred to the Crow class, which is full of problematic children. Voz plans to let Fianna and Claire live together, Noah added. That's why she asked me to lead the way for Fianna. Noah made a small lie. Voz called Noah over not because she wanted Noah to lead the way for Fianna. Chapter 988. In the pitch-black moonlit night, a bolt of lightning flashed through the air like a meteor, suddenly creating a burst of air-breaking sound, cutting through the darkness, directly shooting towards the window of one of the rooms in the Mole class dormitory, explosively shooting towards one of the Mole class dormitory's windows. However, when the lightning that was shooting towards one of the windows of the dormitory of the Mole class hit the inside of the room, before it could touch the window of the room, a cold light shot out from the window of the room as if it was going to meet the lightning that was shooting towards it. Upon closer inspection, the body of the cold light was actually an ordinary knight's sword. Bang! Along with a loud explosion, the knight's sword that shot out from the room collided with the lightning bolt, setting off a strong gust of wind. Immediately after, the bolt of lightning that collided with the knight's sword disappeared. The knight's sword was also shaken into a pile of powder by the bolt of lightning and scattered down from the sky. Witnessing this scene with his own eyes, in the quiet moonlit night, a black shadow flashed out from the thicket in the courtyard. The tip of his foot lightly tapped on a tree branch and his figure gracefully flew up to a statue in the middle of a fountain in the courtyard in front of the mole dormitory. He slightly raised his eyes and shot his gaze towards the room. Quite capable, it would be boring if you didn't do this. After the black shadow finished his words, in just a moment, another black shadow shot out from the room that was targeted by the bolt of lightning. After a few leaps, he steadily landed on a tree not far from the fountain in front of the mole dormitory and looked towards the attacker in a black robe. Two pairs of eyes suddenly collided in the dark night as if sparks had been ignited. The surrounding atmosphere suddenly became extremely dangerous. The person who had come was naturally Noah. After sensing the hostility, Noah reacted in time and without hesitation, he snatched the knight's sword from Alice's waist and threw it out of the room. Coincidentally, the knight's sword that was thrown out by Noah accurately collided with the lightning bolts that came out of nowhere and neutralized the merciless attack. At this moment, Alice and Fiona poked their heads out from the window of the room and clearly saw Noah and the black-robed man confronting each other in front of the courtyard of the mole dormitory. What happened? Fiona asked in surprise. Could it be an intruder? Alice was obviously thinking the same thing. She clenched her teeth angrily. How dare you break into my elven academy and attack the students in public? Are you looking down on my Wind King knights? After saying that, Alice stepped on the windowsill and jumped out of the window. Fiona exclaimed in surprise. Fierce wind, give me the magic spear that pierced through the heart of my enemy, a contractual incantation written in Elven language reverberated in the air. At this moment, a gust of wind spun out from under Alice's feet and supported her to land steadily on the ground. Then, with a spin, it condensed into a gorgeous ceremonial spear in Alice's hand. Who are you? Alice pointed the elven device in her hand at the black-robed man who landed on the statue in the middle of the fountain and spoke in a stern voice. Why did you attack the students of the Elven Academy? Hearing Alice's question, the black-robed man slightly moved his head and looked down at Alice condescendingly. After a while, he spat out some words of contempt. Scram! The person I'm looking for isn't you. The black-robed man's contemptuous words undoubtedly infuriated Alice. Fierce wind, blow to your heart's content. As Alice chanted the magic incantation, the majestic divine power gathered on Knight Maiden's ceremonial spear, stirring up a gust of wind. With a wave of her hand, the wind turned into a substantial shockwave that swept toward the black-robed man. The howling wind caused the ground and air to tremble as it surged toward the black-robed man like a raging wave. I believe that even Witch G, who is also an elven envoy like Alice, would be unable to get up from the ground after being hit by such a powerful attack, right? However, facing the howling wind, the black-robed man's mouth that was hidden under his robe curved up in a sinister arc as he raised one of his hands. If one looked closely, they would be able to see that. The hand that was raised from under the black robe was covered with bright red lines. Appear. Mirror elf. When this voice came from the black-robed man's mouth, one of the bright red patterns that covered his arms suddenly lit up. Suddenly, the air in front of the black-robed man suddenly distorted as if it was spitting out something, and a huge round mirror appeared in front of the black-robed man. The round mirror wasn't a weapon or a prop, but an elf. Moreover, it was an elf that had the ability to reflect elemental attacks. The gust of wind that swept over directly landed on the mirror elf, but in a tremor, it was reflected back. It rubbed against the atmosphere, stirring up bursts of sand and dust, and enveloped Alice, who couldn't react in time. Facing the gust of wind that was reflected back, before Alice could react, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. He didn't use any powerful weapons. Nor did he use any amazing abilities. Noah just stretched out his hand toward the gust of wind that swept toward him. And the next moment, the gust of wind that fell on Noah suddenly stagnated, shook violently, and dissipated as if it was annihilated. Noah! Noah! Alice finally reacted. You step back first, Alice. Noah looked straight at the black-robed man and narrowed his eyes. Are you here for me? Correct. The black-robed man grinned. After all, you're a male elf user like me. A male elf user like me. Alice, who was behind Noah, was stunned. A male elf user like you. Fianna, who poked her head out of the window, was stunned. A male elf user like you. Even Noah was slightly stunned as he stared at the black-robed man. The black-robed man slowly took off the black robe that covered his body. At this moment, Noah clearly heard Alice and Fianna's gasps. Because the person who threw away the black robe and exposed his full face under the moonlight was an unexpected person. His brown skin was covered with bright red lines, and even his face was engraved with tattoos. Instead of saying that his short hair was red, it would be more accurate to say that it was a dark red. Just like that, the other party stared at Noah with a pair of red eyes like a tiger eyeing its prey. There was an arrogant and unruly smile on its face. It was a man. How come? Alice exclaimed in shock. Undoubtedly, he just used an elf. A male elf user. Fianna's face was full of astonishment. Besides Noah, there are other male elf users? Not to mention Alice and Fianna, even Noah's pupils constricted. Lestia had said that male elves had never existed. The reason why Demon King Solomon was able to become an elf envoy despite being a male was because he had inherited the power of the Dark Elf King. The reason why Noah could become an elven envoy was because the mana source in his body had the ability to absorb other types of energy and transform them into this energy source. This allowed Noah to possess divine might and be able to enslave elves. That was how he became an elven envoy. Now, the power of the Dark Elf King had been inherited by Lotus because of the world fragment. It was impossible for this person to have an energy source that could transform into any energy like Noah. However, this person was indeed a male and enslave elves. This was a fact. In other words, this person was very likely to be a true male elf user. Noah stared at the man with an arrogant smile on his face and asked, "You, who are you?" "I'm Geo Inzak." The dark-skinned young man introduced himself. The successor of the Demon King. After saying that, the male elf user who called himself Geo reached out his hand toward Noah. "Show yourself." Fong Elf. One of the bright red lines on the male elf user's hand lit up again. It was already very difficult to control a dual contract. In the end, this person actually contracted a third sprite. In this case, how could this guy who called himself Geo still control sprites? Even when he had two sprites, he couldn't fully utilize their strength. Under such circumstances, contracting a third sprite would definitely cause the divine might to be completely unbalanced and unusable. Noah didn't have time to think too much. He stared at the spear of light that was shooting towards him, and with a turn of his body, one of his legs whipped forward like a fierce whip amidst the whistling wind. Bang dash! As expected, the spear of light that was shot out was directly blown up by Noah's kick. Once again, it turned into an explosion of light and was annihilated in the air. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared under Noah and imprinted an arrogant and unruly face into Noah's eyes. "Show yourself." Sword Sprite. A familiar light flashed from another bright red pattern on Geo's arm. A simple and unadorned sword suddenly appeared in Geo's hand. He tightly grasped it and swung it, cutting through the air and chopping towards Noah's head. "Be careful." Alice and Fianna cried out in alarm. However, even without Alice and Fianna's warning, Noah, who had the most outstanding sensing ability, would never be ambushed. Clink. With a crisp sound, the long sword transformed from the sword sprite was clamped between two of Noah's fingers, stopping in midair. Oh! Geo tried to pull the weapon in his hand but couldn't make it move at all. He looked at Noah with surprise and mockery. You do have some strength. No wonder you can compete with Liana Subble in a sword dance. Ignoring Geo's mockery and surprise, Noah tightly clamped Geo's sword sprite with 2 fingers and looked into Geo's eyes as he said coldly, "Fourth sprite." The 4th sprite. You've contracted so many sprites, yet you're still able to summon them and use them in battle. That's pretty good. Although the dual contract would cause the fairies to affect each other and cause an imbalance in the divine aura, greatly reducing the fairies' power and making it impossible for them to be summoned, there was no lack of talented fairies in this world. Being able to freely command 2 sprites under the condition of concluding a dual contract, and being able to fully display the power of the 2 sprites to the sprite user, that also existed. However, a triple contract was too rare. Quadruple contracts were almost impossible to completely control the sprites. However, Geo used 4 sprites in total. Although each sprite wasn't very strong and couldn't fully utilize their power, with such a large number of contracted sprites, just by complementing each other's weaknesses, the sprite user's battle power would greatly increase. This male sprite user who came out of nowhere had such an ability. Ha! There's nothing to be surprised about, right? Geo continuously exerted force on the sword sprite in his hand and the corner of his mouth cracked into an arrogant smile. Demon King Solomon can control the 72 pillar sprites. Geo's words made Noah frown. At this moment, Noah noticed a problem. Every time Geo used a sprite, a bright red pattern on his body would light up. The bright red patterns on Geo's body had been engraved all over his body and there was no way to count them. Thinking of this, Noah said in surprise. Could it be, didn't I say it before? Geo sneered. I'm the successor of the Demon King. After speaking, Geo threw away the weapon in his hand and jumped away. Show yourself. Wind Sprite. A violent whirlwind with Geo as the center suddenly shook and expanded in all directions. In an instant, it attacked Noah who wasn't too far away from Geo. Alice, who wasn't too far away, was suddenly hit by the violent whirlwind and was directly sent flying. Noah, on the other hand, stood firm in the midst of the gale. His uniform fluttered in the wind, and his bangs swayed with all his might. However, it could not block Noah's gaze that was beginning to turn cold. Then, such a sentence reverberated from the center of the hurricane-like violent whirlwind and clearly drilled into everyone's ears. The successor of the Demon King. Who are you trying to fool? The moment the words fell, Noah's feet suddenly landed in the violent whirlwind. With a muffled bang, he turned into an arrow that left the bow and rushed out of the eye of the hurricane against the raging violent whirlwind. He flashed in front of the retreating Geo. Geo didn't even have the chance to react before a punch with astonishing force suddenly imprinted on his chest. Bang! With a muffled sound, Geo's body flew backward and heavily smashed into the ground not far away. Do you deserve to be called the Demon King? Looking at Geo who fell to the ground, Noah curled his lips and smiled. If the Demon King is as easy to deal with as you, I don't have to worry about how to deal with the strongest sword dancer. The Demon King referred to the elf envoy who inherited the power of the Dark Elf King. If the Elf King's power was only at this level, Noah really didn't have to worry about it. Let me ask you, Alice. Did Liana Subble really come to the academy? Hearing Versilia's words, everyone who knew about Versilia immediately understood what was going on. 3 years ago, Versilia had high hopes for her. She stepped onto the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival at a young age and was even chosen as a substitute for the 12 Knight Generals. However, she was defeated in the preliminary round of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. The most powerful Elven Maiden defeated Versilia with one strike and forced her to step down from the stage of the Elven Sword Dance Festival. Therefore, when Versilia heard that Renasubble had appeared in Alicia Elven Academy, she immediately increased the speed of her mission and even rushed back in the middle of the night. In other words, the reason why Versilia returned to the academy early was because of the appearance of the strongest sword dancer. Sister. Alice spoke in a deep voice. Lady Leanna Subble did come to the Elven Academy, but she has already left. It doesn't matter. I just need to confirm the authenticity of the news that she came here. Versilia's eyes flashed with a frightening light. She turned her head and stared at Noah. However, if this news is accurate, then the news that a male Elven envoy recently transferred to the Elven Academy and used the same sword dance as Leanna Subble to tie with the strongest sword dancer is also true. When these words came out of Versilia's mouth, Noah felt it. He felt that Versilia was staring at him. It was the joy of a skilled hunter who had found a suitable prey and the determination to challenge a powerful opponent to prove himself. To be able to fight to a draw with Leanna Subble, to be honest, I really don't want to believe such nonsense, because no one understands her strength better than I do. Versilia slowly raised her hand in Noah's direction. So, you must prove your strength to me, male Elven envoy. As she spoke, a vast amount of divine might gathered in Versilia's hand like a dense fog. Elder sister. Alice was shocked. Even Fayanna almost cried out in surprise. However, just as Versilia, who had gathered her divine power, was about to launch an attack, Noah smiled. There was no trace of a smile in his laughter. Both of you are so arrogant to the point of looking for trouble. Do you really think I'm made of mud? You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.